To quote Christian Horner, drivers will just try and get their nose ahead at the apex and then claim they have to be given rule. Where was this last week, Christian? And then he brought the telemetry out as well and was like...
mean, if there is actually a song called I Told You So, this is what it was. This is precisely what we... I mean, I just love the IRA. It didn't take long, right? It took 6 days.
It took 6 days.
6 days.
I have to say, I am genuinely surprised that it was Lando, because all week I said to you, like, I'm getting called a Lando fanboy here as normal, because whenever you back up a driver they don't like, you're just... It can't be that you have reason. You're just a fanboy. But I expected, I was like, Russell or Sainz will do this to Verstappen. I didn't expect it to be Lando, but it happened so quickly, and I haven't stopped laughing about it since yesterday.
Oh, God. I mean, and it's... We told you so. That's all I'll say. We told you so. It's as simple as... The thing is, what people don't understand, if a sport is broken, if the rules are broken, whenever they favor or hurt someone, they don't really look at who your favorite driver is.
Yep.
That's something the Lewis Hamilton fans realize in 2021. I continue to say this thing.
Yeah.
You have to understand this thing. A broken sport is not good for anyone. And maybe now they've learned the lesson. Actually, they haven't. You can just see the discourse, but they will never learn. It's the same cult Lewis Hamilton, the whole fan base that was there. It's just migrated to this one, where it's the same victimization, same nonsense. You just don't want to watch and follow the sport with basically good faith. You don't do that, so cry.
All of the people, all of the Max fans who, throughout when Lewis Hamilton was being, like, you know, his fan base was being insane, who were commenting on my things, being like, thank you, a reasonable take when I'm like, this Lewis Hamilton stuff's ridiculous, are now the people commenting on my thing, the exact same people being like, oh, this is just, it's against Max. And I'm like, you just literally have just become Team LH. It's the funniest thing in the world. I guess we should talk about the incidences and the Max and Lando. I guess that's...
Yeah, I think makes sense. Let's start from there only. So, first of all, would you like to set the table for this one?
If you want. First of all, just because we're going to be talking about Lando Norris favourably. Hello, Sai. So... I know he hates this. It's fine. Maybe I'll put a chapter marker that says Sai, click here, and it just skips. Just for fun. But yeah, so essentially, obviously, Max started ahead of Norris and the run down to turn one. He actually got ahead of Sainz, who started on pole, which was kind of to be expected. Pole in Mexico is actually, it's one of the worst places to start on pole.
Yep.
Sainz managed to kind of fight him back, I think, by lap 7 after the safety car, right? If I'm not mistaken, 7 or 8.
Yep.
Max was ahead before the safety car. Once Sainz got ahead, then Lando started tracking down Verstappen. It actually didn't look like he was catching that much of points, but once he kind of got on the back, it was interesting to see he didn't wait around at all. He just went for it, which after last week, I kind of, in the back of my head, consistently said it will be Russell or Sainz that will kind of do the same as Verstappen did last week. I was very surprised that it was Norris. Norris, according to Christian Horner's telemetry, didn't actually go at the same rate as normal. He kind of swung it around the outside, dive bombed around the outside. I know. But yeah, he basically just made sure he had his foot in. He was controlled, went around the corner, and there's no way to prove, perfectly in this case, there's no way to prove whether or not he would have made the corner because he wasn't given a chance to, but he was ahead at the apex the whole way. He was apparently 15 kilometers an hour faster than normal. So what? Ahead at the apex.
Something happens. Something that happens due to DRS. So
he was ahead at the apex and in control, and last week showed us that's all that's important. Bottas incident with Russell showed us that's exactly what's important. So Max had to give him racing room. Max, understandably and predictably, didn't, which was normal. And then there was a second incident. I would say the first incident was just kind of slam dunk penalty. It was just racing. Norris took advantage of the rules. Max kind of fell straight for it, which I didn't expect, to be honest. I thought he would be ready for this. The second penalty then, Lando was ahead. Lando cleverly gave the position back to Sainz, but stuck ahead of Verstappen. I genuinely, I have to say, watching it the first time before watching it back, I thought when Max lunged it, I actually thought that was Norris kind of giving the position back for some reason. I realize I was mistaken now, but that's what it looked like on the TV feed at the time.
I think that
And I
was
was
the
like,
case. I
maybe
think
it
that
was
was the
because he
case.
did kind of
He
move to the
was
side and
trying to
slowed down.
he was trying to give back the place, but Max had a red missed moment that kind of cost him.
Yeah. I that's what it looked like to me. The second time watching, I'm not 100%, but either way, Max wasn't ahead at the apex, which Norris either cleverly positioned it to or wasn't giving it back, one way or the other, I'm not sure. And Max literally just ran it off track. I think that's the incident for both of us, where the first incident, 10-second penalty, that's exactly what was laid out last week, and everyone's arguing, why was it 10 instead of 5? Read the FIA documents. There was mitigating circumstances last week. We can explain that if you want. As for the second incident, personally, that was a proper, like, he caused a collision. He ran him off track.
Let's go through it one by one. Let's first go through the first incident. Now, again, there are a lot of people that have this question that why it was not a 5-second penalty, why it was a 10-second penalty. So, there are two things actually. The first is that at the start of the season, there has been a change from the FIA where they've increased the severity of the penalty from 5 second to 10 second. That has become more or less the norm. Rare cases where there are minor infringements, you see a 5-second penalty, which was the case with George in last weekend against Bottas. In case of the Max Norris incident, why it was a 5-second penalty, not a 10-second penalty, the reason behind it was Max also went off track, and also he was kind of responsible for pushing Lando off track. So that's a 5-second penalty for that. Lando was getting a 10-second penalty for overtaking off track. And the FIA stewards, they just basically cancelled the whole thing out and gave a 5-second penalty to Lando.
Yeah,
because
they made an
odd
decision of instead of giving 5 and 5, which they perhaps could have done,
10 and 5.
They just or 10 and 5 they decided to just give 5 to 1 and kind of even it out.
Yeah. So that's kind of what why the whole thing actually panned out in this manner. The 10-second penalty for, again, there are a few. Okay, just to specify a couple of things. Again, Horner is saying that Lando was 15 kph quicker or something, right?
Yeah.
I think that was more or less because of DRS, plus the slipstreaming effect. And if you have two eyes and you can see, he made the corner. He was pretty much destined to do it, and the way the trajectory of the way Max went about it, you could see he was just pushing him off track. It was too obvious. That's why it kind of.
I think it was so obvious, and they were told after last week this was what was going to happen. As for the Bottas and Russell incident as well, remember that Russell was on the inside as the overtaker, so it was a different incident. And in that case as well, they did basically they gave some credit that, look, he made the corner overtaking on the inside. He didn't try and push him wide. And again, you need to remember as well that in last week's documents, they essentially said this should be 10 seconds, but there is some mitigating circumstances as to why it won't be this week. And when that happens in Formula One, look back over the years, that is basically, if this happens again, it will be just purely 10 seconds. And precisely. Max knew that coming into the weekend, so sorry, Red Bull fans.
Not only that, another doubt that a lot of people have, and they're questioning the consistency with the FIA, which is, well, we should always do that. But the incident between Checo and Liam Lawson. So in that case, what you saw was Checo dived down the inside, and Liam went off. He pushed Liam off track to a certain extent. But the reason why that was not given a penalty was, first of all, Checo was not entirely in control of the car. So when he pushed Liam off, at the very next turn, he gave Liam racing. There was enough room given for racing, and when Liam came on track, Liam pushed him off. So it kind of cancelled out. That's why there was no penalty, and it was termed as a racing incident.
All of it is
given in the FIA documents. They've actually explained everything, and honestly, they've done a brilliant job on that front.
The other thing is as well, someone brought up last week something similar to the Checo and Lawson incident, where It was actually very similar, sorry, to the Lando and Norris incident from last week, but the reason it
Lando and
relates
Norris
to
incident, which one? Sorry.
or Lando and
Max.
Verstappen incident from Austin. It was basically like for like the same. One, it was from 2023. So as I pointed out, the rules have changed since then. The guidelines have changed.
Yeah.
But the reason it relates to the Lawson Checo one, as I explained to him, was yes, this was Russell and Hamilton, with Russell forcing Hamilton off track, and Russell didn't get a penalty.
No, that's
As
that's incorrect. I know which one you're talking about. That's
it was in
Suzuka.
Japan. Yep.
Yeah, it was in Suzuka. It was Lewis on the inside, Russell was on the outside. Lewis was ahead at the apex.
Yep.
The only reason Lewis was not given a penalty was because he was Russell's teammate. That's all.
That's
Otherwise,
what I was just
it was a
pointing
slam
out
dunk
here
penalty.
is
Yeah.
normally if the teams don't get on the radio and kind of complain, unfortunately, sometimes the FIA director just goes, right, you guys deal with it. And because, as much as Zach Brown hates it, because essentially Lawson and Perez are kind of in the same, not the same team, but kind of the same team.
Yeah.
Unsurprisingly, neither team got on the radio and kicked up a fuss. So it's kind of similar to Hamilton and Russell fighting, where if the team doesn't get on the radio to the race director's like, right, they cancelled each other out. That's it. They've sorted it out between themselves. If that was a situation of that was Norris and Verstappen, then both teams would be complaining and they wouldn't be able to go, oh, just cancel each other out. They'd have to pass it to the stewards and you'd probably get 2 penalties. So for anyone wondering why that's the case, that's kind of basically what it is. Remember that before it goes to the stewards, the race director has to pass it to the stewards. It doesn't just automatically go to the stewards, which I think people don't seem to understand either sometimes. Yeah.
Precisely. Now the more contentious one. Your view on the second incident, what do you think actually happened?
Okay, I am still in 2 minds about whether Norris was giving the position back. I would need to go back and see and stuff. I'm genuinely not sure. Regardless, Norris was clever enough to know that he was basically at the entry point to the apex by the time Verstappen came up. In that position, Verstappen is the overtaking car, and under the guidelines, the overtaking car has to give room, like can't force the other car off track unless they are massively ahead at the apex. All of this rules that I basically said last week, you are just teeing up this exact position to happen. Here we are. In that position, though, unlike the first one, where Verstappen did force him off track, this was just Verstappen blatantly just being aggressive. He didn't even just force him off track. He actually banged wheels with him, came right over, forced him the entire way off track, went off track himself, hit Norris's car, and then continued on. Didn't give the position back either, by the way. Stayed ahead. So at that point, even if Norris was giving him position, Max should have just given the position back there as well. So for me, that is overtaking off track, forcing another driver, causing a collision. That's a drive-through penalty. And I'm sorry, Max fans, but that is. If Norris did that exact same thing to Max, could you genuinely look us in the eye and with a straight face say you think that Norris should have only got a 10-second penalty? Because I guarantee you my answer to that is bollocks. That was a drive-through penalty, and I think Verstappen got off very easy there. So if you want to complain about the first 10-second penalty being 5, then the second one should have absolutely been a drive-through. He could have ended up outside of the points because of that there. Easily.
Yeah.
Because he would have had to serve a drive-through and then a 10-second penalty on the pit stop. That would have put him at the back of the grid completely.
Yeah.
So,
maybe 7th or 8th. I don't think 7th or 8th probably, because the gaps are too big. Regardless, that's not the main contentious point. I think 10 seconds was fine. I'm not too, because the thing is, I've not seen a drive-through penalty for anyone. I mean, the kind of shit that Kevin Magnussen pulled at Miami early this season, I haven't seen him get any drive-through. So I tend to hold my breath when something like this comes up. So, because the thing is, there's no precedence of something like this. Maybe they should set in future, and I'm pretty sure they're going to need to do that because the next 4 races are going to be very
contentious. Yeah.
I think it was entirely a case of it was head loss from Max. There's no other way to put it, because he saw that Lando was ahead of him, and I think the calculation that he did was Lando is not going to give up the position. What he's going to try to do is trying to stretch the 5 second or 10 second gap, whichever the penalty is going to be.
Yeah.
And McLaren had the pace to do that. I think they both knew to an extent that that's going to be the situation.
Yeah.
Now, when that happens, he was a bit desperate. He didn't really notice correctly because, again, it's my view. I've seen it twice or thrice, the replay. In my view, Lando was giving him room to just let him through.
That's
That
what
was
I
what
thought.
I
Yeah.
could understand, because that position, you don't really try to make those lunges. It doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah.
Throughout
Also,
the race,
just
we
where
didn't
he
really see
positioned
that.
the car was odd as well. Like it seemed like
Yeah,
he was going a bit further to the outside than you would normally kind of cut across the apex there, and he was
yeah.
kind of right
And
on
you
the
don't slow
outside.
down the car at that very moment, right? So
No.
that's
No.
also a thing. And you add all this up, it's just, he could have easily, I mean, again, even at that point in time, maybe if Red Bull was smart enough, they could have just let him through, let Lando
Hmm.
through, and be fine with the 10 second penalty. But
Yeah.
again, why they did not do that is because they wanted to hold up Lando as much as they could. It was a catch 22 situation for them. So overall, I think it just appears that, look, there's, when it comes to defensive driving, what I've realized is it's the perfection and the margin that these drivers have is very small.
Hmm.
And I think we saw it with Alonso earlier in the season when it came to what happened in, I think it was, yeah, it was the sprint in China where he was able to hold off. I think he was P2 and he was able to
Hmm.
hold off a lot of cars for a long time. And then all of a sudden, the car just, the tires were off the cliff, and I think he collided with Carlos Sainz and just went back.
Yeah.
And these kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
things happen because, look, your brilliance can only take you so far when the car is just not performing. And I think
Yep.
this weekend, what happened with Max is he came in with the confidence that he can bully Lando,
Hmm.
and he's slowly starting to realize that the you can only get away with these things once or twice, but that's where the
I
problem
think
comes.
personally, I think Lando came into this weekend after last weekend realizing that like he needs to be fully aggressive with Max now. But he also, I thought it was very good driving for Lando because he played Max at his own game, but also ensured in both cases to kind of move and give enough space because he knew like he can't afford to just be taken out because it's
Yeah,
advantage Max if both of them DNF, for example, you know, like Max is already far enough ahead that
yeah.
Max can
I
afford a
think that's,
DNF.
yeah, exactly. He
You
can
know,
precisely, and
he's far enough
that's
ahead of Leclerc that if
Leclerc
Norris
is,
and
yeah,
Max
70s.
DNF, yeah, like if Norris and Max DNF in one of these races, there's not
Yeah,
enough for Leclerc to catch him reasonably, and it takes Norris out of the fight. If Max DNFs and Norris continues, that's a huge issue for Max because it
yeah,
really swings it back. And I think Norris knew that. I have to say, I didn't expect Norris to kind of play it this well. Because if I'm honest, I didn't feel like after Austria and a couple of other incidents with the two of them, Norris was actually learning, like, I need to get on this. And this
yeah,
felt like the first time where I was looking at it going, I think Norris has actually learned he needs to play this game now. You know, like, and maybe it is just a case of pressure off where he's like, right, realistically, the title is a bit too far away unless something swings. So I'm just going to play him at his own game now. I have nothing to lose either. And I think that's probably the right mindset because it'll set him up for 2025. You know, if he doesn't win this year, you'll get the right Norris
yeah,
next year. And I think it also, you can see that Verstappen definitely plays a different driving game with different drivers. And I think
yeah.
Norris has finally realized that like he needs to make sure that Max knows he's not going to just move out of the way. He's not going to back out. You know, like this is.
But I think it might be a bit too early to make that judgment, because this was a case of Lando catching. He caught out. He basically caught Max out a bit out of place, because
Yeah.
what you can see in that particular incident is the first one. Max is kind of boxed in.
Yeah.
In front of him there's a Ferrari, and to his right is the McLaren, and he has to make a split second decision where if he does not brake at that very moment, he's going to clatter into the Ferrari, and that's not a good thing for him either.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why he kind of weighed his options. Again, it's going to be very, very close, but I think Max has kind of played his cards in terms of, I think we'll get to that bit as well. First of all, I think what seems quite obvious right now is Max is going into the entire thing with a very sole focus. And I think it's a wrong way to approach it, but it is what it is. The sole focus of keeping Lando behind him at every
Yeah.
race. And I
Yeah.
think that kind of sole focus can hurt you in the long run, cause
It can backfire very quickly.
yeah,
All it takes is like a miscalculation there of him going off the track, for example, right? Or when he had that kind of lunge, a
yeah,
miscalculation there of clipping the inside of or clipping Norris's front wheel, right?
yeah,
Norris survives that. Max goes into the wall. That no longer becomes like I kept Norris behind. That becomes oh shit, like I'm now 17, 18 points down. That happens one time over the next 4 races. It
and you're done.
swings right back into Norris can win this now. So you're right. This is the wrong way to go about it. He is far enough ahead. The straight and right way to go about this, if he had played it, I think, rightly, right? We'll talk about the idea that once he got ahead, he was just playing the game of backing up Norris, and that was a calculated move. If they calculated that, I think they did it poorly. Realistically, he could have ended up 4th, and that would have been a 6-point difference instead of 10th. So they miscalculated if that was their plan.
No. In terms of after he got the 2 penalties, at that point he was just trying to hold on to whatever he had.
See,
I think there's also
I think
a bigger worry that Red Bull is not strong.
if that was the case, I think they did it poorly because after that point, he tried to catch the Ferraris. And he spent about half of the stint trying to catch the Ferraris. You can see he gets within 2 seconds, then he's out with 2 seconds, then he's back up to nearly 2 seconds. So he's trying to catch them.
Yeah.
And if they made that calculation, in my view, they only made it about kind of halfway through the stint, at which point they lost Norris kind of 3 seconds, if you look at it that way. 3 seconds is not enough for that calculation. So if they did it poorly. And I think Lando was always going to catch Leclerc.
Right?
It was
Lando
6 seconds in total.
6 seconds. He was 6 seconds behind Leclerc.
It was
when
6
Max
seconds in
pitted.
total, but my point is, throughout that stint, he kind of was catching and falling back, catching and falling back.
Yeah.
So in reality, if he was calculating that, they didn't calculate it until halfway through the stint, in which case, in reality, they only kind of caused 3 seconds of a loss to Norris. So if their game was to do that, it didn't really work, essentially. Maybe that was their plan, but it wasn't enough to make, like, 3 seconds wasn't enough of a difference for Sainz and Norris not to be on top of each other in reality over the course of the race.
But do you think Lando could have won the race? Precisely. Even I
don't think so.
I think Carlos had a lot of pace in hand, and he was just
so
managing
do I.
things.
He was managing. And that's why I think, like, if his plan was to hold up Lando to stop him winning the race, he didn't do enough. It didn't do enough to make the difference if Norris was going to catch Sainz. And in reality, he could have easily not done that and finished 4th, in which case he would have gained more points. So it was a poor calculation. It was a really poor. I don't believe it was a calculation. I think it was red mist. Red Bull decided to kind of just back him on it. And then later on, as the race unfolded, then it's like, oh shit, right, we've made the wrong decision here. I'll try and back up Norris. And it's like, oh, it's too little too late now. Yeah, that's what it looked like to me.
The tires were done, right? The tire was
Yeah.
by the time I think Max pitted, he was basically a sitting duck, maybe a lap or two, and Lando was through.
And then it's easy to say it. It's easy to say afterwards, oh, I was just trying to back him up. It's like,
that's nonsense.
There's not really evidence.
A lot of people have said, and a lot of people are actually trying to buy into that idea. I just
if he
don't
did,
think
he
so.
did it poorly. That's my. If he did, then he did a really shitty job.
The problem is
of
he was basically stuck in a no man's land, right? Because he could not slow down enough, because what if the Mercedes passed him? They ended up passing him. But again, he also didn't want to be in a scenario where he had to overtake the two Haas drivers on track.
Yeah.
So he had to make that calculation as well, because a 20-second penalty means you're basically right at the back of the grid.
If he didn't have the second 10-second penalty, even just that, he likely would have ended up in 4th, realistically, given the pace of the Mercedes.
100%.
So, like I said, bad calculation. If that was their decision, and I've seen some Red Bull fans saying that, no offense, Sai, I like you, I mean other ones. My opinion is, well, they did it really fucking poorly then. It wasn't well executed.
I'm not sure. By the way, I'm not sure Red Bull had the pace. If he was once he was behind the two Mercedes, I don't think he would have jumped either of them. Even if it's a 10-second penalty, because by the end of the race, and again, it's probably one of the random weekends, Kevin Magnussen in his Haas was catching up with Max, and apparently that had to do with the much older PU that Max had to run. So maybe that
I wonder, will
compromises
that be a
race a bit.
problem for them at the next?
Yeah, it will be.
rest of
They
the
have to
races?
change. They have to change and get a new one. I think this kind of is actually a perfect segue into something that not many people are actually talking about. There's a lot of crying and whinging on the fact that Red Bull, the whole FIA thing, the regulations, the British bias, and whatever nonsense. I think people are not really actually able to understand why Max Verstappen is currently, and I think since Austin, why he is in a mode where he's just back to being Mad Max, honestly. Which it's just a similar mode to what he had in Saudi 2021, where he just
yeah.
knew he had to do that because he knew he didn't have the car. That's the kind of mindset that he had then. And he has this mindset right now, even though there are 47 points in 4 races, which means 12 points per race weekend.
Yeah.
So what's
if we
what
exclude
do
the
you
sprints, basically, yeah.
per
'Cause
race
there's
weekend?
two
So
sprints.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Per race weekend, if
Oh,
you
per
take
race
that
weekend.
into
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Because I have my own view, and I've written a piece. I mean, it should be published in an hour or so on the same thing. I did the whole calculation. So
I
first go for it.
think I think personally, right, if you look at the pace over the last couple of weeks, Ferrari have been fastest over Austin, and in Mexico here, they were probably the fastest again.
Yeah.
But in those two tracks, in Austin, McLaren knew I didn't realize, but McLaren realized, and they said it early on, that wasn't going to be a track that suited them. I think Mexico, Ferrari, Sainz even said earlier in the season, Mexico is one he thinks they'll be strong at. So I think there is a chance that Max realizes that out of the next 4 tracks, the only one where there's a good chance that Red Bull could be ahead of McLaren and that McLaren won't be the out-and-out fastest car is Las Vegas. That's the only one of the 3, or of the 4, right? At Brazil, I would say it is likely that McLaren will be back to being fastest at Brazil. If I had to bet, I would say so. You don't think so? No.
Ferrari.
You think Ferrari again? Maybe. I mean, I think it'll be close. I would guess, if I'm honest, I would guess that the McLaren will be faster there. At Qatar, the McLaren will absolutely be the fastest.
They'll blow the doors off everyone.
Yeah. And then at Abu Dhabi, with the new kind of faster track layout that they did in 2021, wasn't it, onwards? I think McLaren, I think to suit the Mercedes, I think that McLaren will be fastest there. But even if you say it's going to be very close between McLaren and Ferrari, and I think Red Bull is going to be, apart from again maybe Las Vegas. I'm not sure how that'll play out, but I think I think Red Bull will be third fastest at every track except for Qatar, or except for
Red
Las
Bull might be
Vegas.
4th fastest at Qatar because
Maybe.
Mercedes is
Mercedes.
brilliant. But even here, Mercedes was, I think, second. I think it was the second fastest car in the fast speed sections, and Qatar is entirely fast speed sections and just a few slow speed ones. It plays into their hands.
So if you look at that, right, Max has to contend now with not only points where McLaren will be fastest, but where Mercedes and Ferrari could be ahead of them. Unlike Perez, they cannot count on Piastri being out every weekend. Piastri's been off his game the last 2 weeks. I don't expect that to continue. He's a very good, very capable driver. There is no reason to say it won't be. For example, if Norris wins a race, there's no reason to think in Qatar, let's say, that it couldn't be Norris, Piastri, Hamilton, Russell, Sainz, Leclerc, all ahead of Max.
Yeah.
That is a huge point swing. Not to mention if he has to take a penalty in one of the races, which is probably going to be Brazil if he's going to do that, because it's the most sensible one. So let's say in Brazil he starts at the back. Right.
No, it will be just a five place penalty.
Just the
only
PU, right?
Yeah.
Well, even in that case, let's say
Not the PU, the IC. PU is the entire. I think IC the only.
Well, let's say in that case he finishes. Let's say he loses like 6, 7, 8 points to Norris in that race, right? If it goes well, that could still be a situation where you're looking 6, 7, 8 points, maybe more. You know, it could be more. Then
let's
you go into.
I mean, let's break it down a bit so that it becomes clear why Max is doing what he's doing right now.
Frustrated,
right?
Yeah.
So first of all, we have Brazil. Best case scenario, it's going to be the third fastest car. Red Bull is going to be the third fastest car in Brazil.
Realistically,
best case scenario, because I think Mercedes is going to struggle. It has tended to struggle in the last couple of years. Not only the last year. Before that, they won. Yeah.
And their characteristics this year make it kind of maybe the same.
The slow speed sections are not. They're not good on that particular bits. So that's where Mercedes is going to struggle. So you have Red Bull as the third fastest car. And if Red Bull is the third fastest car, you can say if everything works perfectly. By the way, I expect Ferrari to be the fastest in Brazil. So you expect a Lando podium and a Max on P5, something like that. In the worst case scenario, that's around an 8 to 9 point swing if that happens. And that's on one weekend where
I think
don't
that's
expect
best. That's
that's
best
the
case
best
for
case
Max.
scenario. Yeah.
For Max.
The
Worst
yeah,
case for Norris. Yeah.
yeah. And the problem is Brazil is not necessarily the problem. The problem is Qatar. Because in Qatar, Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, I I think all three of them are going to be quicker than Red Bull.
I wouldn't be
It
surprised.
seems
Yeah.
to be the case. And McLaren is more or less going to win that race. And they
Yeah.
also have a sprint. So
Yeah.
you have
And
both.
and we know Piastri is good around that track.
Yeah.
So there's no reason it couldn't be a McLaren 1-2.
Yeah.
And if it's a 1-2 at this late stage with this many points, if McLaren were to, for any, like, there's no way McLaren are letting Piastri win that race if it's a 1-2. Like, there's no way.
No doubt.
No, not a chance.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They would have to liquidate the team if they were that stupid. So,
Precisely.
yeah, it's not going to happen.
Just basically do that. I mean, that would be that would be better in that case. So if that is happening, you have Lando P1 and let's say Max is P6 in that particular race. That's around 25 and 8 points. That's 17 points.
Let's just, right, it's 47 points at the minute, right?
Yeah.
Let's split the difference and say even Brazil goes really well for Max. Really well, and we say 6
P5.
points instead of 8. Let's say 6 instead of 8.
No,
just to be really fair.
No, in terms of, I'm saying he'll start the race around P7, P8 because he has to take the 5 place penalty. Remember? And you add that to the...
Sure,
again,
but what I'm saying is, let's say that he does really well in the sprint, then takes the penalty, all of that stuff adds up, and it ends up with, instead of 8 points difference, it's 6 points. Let's just say, for argument's sake, right?
Yeah.
Just
Go
to be
for it.
really fair to Max fans and show why this is problematic, right?
Yeah.
So then he's on 41 points. There's a 41 point gap.
Yeah.
Qatar, we both agree, is going to be a disaster. So what are we saying?
15
17
point-
points? 15
let's
points?
take 15, yeah.
Right.
So we're basically down to 26 points with 2 races.
Yep. Which is still a lot.
Again, Las Vegas is a track which is basically, you can say it is a lot similar to Monza. Red Bull was the fourth fastest car at Monza.
Shit, yeah, they were. Yeah. I
Again,
thought it would
there
be
has
better
been
for
the
Red Bull.
upgrade. Sorry?
I thought it would be better for Red Bull, but you're right. No, it shouldn't be. It probably won't be. It'd be a
Again,
Ferrari
there
track.
is a factor of the less grippy surface, if that plays a role or something, because last year it did. Still, best case scenario is going to be P3. And I think McLaren wins because the less grippier the track, easier to the car that is, you can say, which is quicker to generate temperature into tires, that is going
be
to have the
better.
benefit, and that's where McLaren tends to have an edge over Ferrari. So you expect Lando to do well on that particular scenario. And again, that's the one where you see around 8 to 9 points, just a best case scenario, 8 to 9 point swing again.
Okay.
And then you're going into, by the way, the second sprint is where?
Qatar,
There are 2
isn't it?
sprints left. I didn't count that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you count the sprint as well, which is 8 till 1, that's the gap, right? 8, 7, 6.
That's an extra
So
7
around
points.
4 or 5
That's
points
what I was
more.
thinking. Let's say
Fuck.
5 points more. So all of a
Jesus.
sudden, then
22 points.
it's
and that's-
21, let's say. 21 points going into Vegas. He gets another 9 points on there, let's say, in Vegas.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, you're down to 12 points in the final race, something like that.
Yeah.
And this is all, by the way, this is all best case
Being-
for Max
yeah,
in our
exactly.
opinion. This could swing really heavily, and one DNF, and this is game over essentially.
This is done.
Because in the last race, you say 12 points. 12 points sounds like a lot, but in Abu Dhabi, I would once again say that Red Bull is realistically looking to be the third fastest car. On top of that, McLaren is still bringing upgrades, and the floor did work. I wasn't sure it would, but it did work. So
worked.
McLaren seemed to know what they're doing. So, I mean, 12 points at the last race seems
12
like
points
steep.
is basically what? It's 25 for first. P4 gets 12, right?
Yep. So that's it then. 13 points.
So basically, Lando needs to win, and Max cannot be lower than P4.
Yep.
See, that's
And that
that's the
is
calculation.
best case for Max. Like we've said, that is best case for Max over the next few races.
Yeah.
And like I said, if all it takes is if Max just has one of his aggressive moves and it ends up in a DNF, that's it. Like that could be the game over straight away. Like that
Yeah,
would be
that
it.
is, but also this kind of explains the method behind Max's madness right now.
He just wants to stop
why
Norris.
he's very why he's very desperate to just compromise Lando's race every time.
Mm-hmm.
Look, Max is not foolish. He's very smart when it comes to all these things.
He is
and
the
he's
best
made
driver
his
since
calculation
Schumacher, in my
already.
opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that might help a few Max Verstappen to stay.
Well, no, like for anyone who thinks this is just like an anti-Max thing, it's not. Both of us agree
not.
he's the best driver on the grid.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And
I
he's
think
the best since Michael. I think, and
Yep.
if his career trajectory goes the way it is going, I won't be surprised if I rank him next to Michael. If
Yeah.
his career
And-
trajectory goes this way.
But that right there, that addition right there being best case for Max, leaving it marginal, is why I think that the idea of going in with this aggressive attitude is poorly thought out. Because if he just scores every weekend to the maximum, he is putting all the pressure on Lando to have to succeed every weekend. If he goes in and he goes with this aggressive task and tries to hold up Lando, that could very easily backfire to a point where all it takes is one DNF from doing something like that, or ending up in gravel, grass, clipping a wall, anything, and all of a sudden there is no pressure on Norris and all the pressure is completely on Max at a point where Max doesn't have a car to take that pressure on.
But do you
So
think?
I think it's a poor way to do it.
But do you think what Max is thinking is, if there is a particular race where I can just hold off Lando, just like he did in Austin, that's basically a race where there's a swing on the other side. Do you think
Sure.
he's actually thinking on those lines? Because I
Yeah,
think that's where
possibly.
his entire thought process is. Because every time I think, again, a lot of people have said that the overtake from Carlos Sainz to Max, it was entirely down to again Sainz being brilliant and everything. But I think it was also down to the fact that Max wasn't
Max
willing to
played
fight.
played ball with him. He
Yeah.
kind of he
left the
didn't
door
fight
open.
it too
Max
much.
never leaves the door open.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's only one reason behind it, because he does not want to get into. He knew first of all that Ferrari was quicker. He knew
Mm-hmm.
that pretty much. And look, the way it caught on to him, it was more than obvious. But the other reason was does not want to get into a scrap with someone with whom basically it's him who will always come out on the losing side.
Sure. I just think
That
the
was the
reason I
entire
think
thing.
I think it's misguided though, because I right before this race, yeah, if it was any other race, if we talk about the rest of the season, I would say, yeah, bullying Lando's probably the way to go, because Lando seems to be falling for it every time, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's easy to do. The problem now is, it seems like Lando came into this weekend knowing after last weekend, right, fuck it, let's play this game. And Lando played the game and he came out on top, realistically.
Yeah.
Like there's you can try all of the tactics. So, well, Max was playing. It's like, look, even if Max was playing the game, he played it poorly and Lando won that game because he finished second. Max finished sixth when he could have finished fourth. Max lost that game, right? So there's no way to calculate it where Max was playing the game better than Norris this weekend. So
I do think I'll say just one thing. Lando's car placement at the start of the race was very suspect for me, and it kind of infuriated me a bit because I did not understand the concept behind going going into Max Verstappen's slipstream and leaving the other side completely vacant.
yeah,
and letting
yeah.
that was because look,
there's-
every
there's
race
points
we've
of-
seen. Yeah.
Norris is still nowhere near as good as Max in terms of just everything maximizing.
Yeah, but again, you
However-
don't see these mistakes made by other drivers because that was
Sure,
P3
yeah.
P3 to lead is something that we've seen from Max, and we've seen from I think Lewis as well.
He could have done a better job there, and he could have led the race if he had
Yeah,
played the start.
that's
right.
what I think,
100%.
and-
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think that like Max also can't count on those things either, because like there's been races where Lando gets the start perfect or even doesn't, but he has the car, and if the car is under Lando, this is the thing people don't give Lando credit for. If Lando has the car that will work, he will just take off and he's gone. There's no catching
Yeah.
him. He's a very quick driver. Like, you know, we'll talk about
I
this
mean,
in
the
a bit, I'm
second
sure,
stint.
but
Just look at the second stint.
yeah,
That
but even
didn't
looking
make
back,
sense.
even looking back though, all the fans that argued with me over Monza, Piastri's far better than Norris. look at how quick Norris is when he just takes off. If he has a good race, he's just gone. He's a very, very fast racing driver. So I think Max playing this game cannot count on Norris just having a bad start or not maximizing the car. I don't know. Like, if he wants to play this game with him of aggression, I think up until this weekend, I would have said, yeah, bullying Lando will probably work. Something shifted this weekend where it feels to me like Lando's just like, fuck it, I've nothing to lose now. And if I just play the game with him and I come out on top, I could win this championship if something goes wrong for him. So he's like, right, screw it, let's play this game. And if Lando comes to every weekend now going forward, if Lando has actually finally gotten a bit battle hardened and learned a bit from looking over the last few races, and he comes with that attitude, the same attitude every weekend, playing that game, I think, is the bad way to go about it for Max. If Max plays that game and he gets Lando from Austria or Austin, sure, great, brilliant. But if Max plays that game and he gets this Lando, it's not going to work. And
there's also this big issue, right? That unlike Austin, where again the track is conducive for overtaking, you can say that on that track you can pull off these masterful moves and keep the driver behind. You can't do it at Sao Paulo. That straight it'll just breeze by. And again, if that is the case, Max has to be very, very aggressive in that case, and I don't think that's the best way to actually go about it.
That's my point. Like, I mean, if we're saying that, for example, let's go to Sao Paulo. What did we say? We said it could be even like on a best day, a 6-point swing, right, for Max over the weekend.
Yeah.
If Max now tries that again and lunges, and Lando is ahead at the apex and kind of moves off, and Max goes off the track himself completely, and Lando gives the position back, and we once again get a situation where Max does that a couple of times, ends up with another 20-second penalty. All of a sudden, it's not 6 points, it's 10, it's 15. You know, like it's like it could be very easy. That's my point. It's like the clever thing for Max to do is to just maximize every weekend and do it that way. I just think the aggression is kind of a 50-50 coin flip. It could work really well, and he could upset Lando to the point where he wins it outright and throws Lando off. But the flip side of that coin is it could go really badly, and he could end up going into Abu Dhabi being like 7 or 8 points off, in which case McLaren has a lot to answer for because they could have won it before then. But you know, like the coin flip, that is a coin flip, and I think it's a bad way to go about it. Ironically, it's kind of Michael Schumacher-esque in terms of thinking, and it has worked for Schumacher, but it's also gone horribly wrong for Schumacher as well.
1997, yeah.
Exactly. It's a flip of a coin that could go really badly for you, and you could get disqualified from the whole season, you know?
And the thing is, and he has to be very careful because he's already at 6 penalty points. And if he gets if there is something that he does in Brazil and gets 3 penalty points, then in the last 3 races, he has to be on his best behavior because one bad mistake, one bad error, and you're banned. Then you can just sit home and then you're done. The problem is, after the Magnussen ban, the precedent of them kind of being easy on it is gone now. Because McLaren will just be like, whoa. You gave him a ban. Like, you can't now say, oh, there's a title fight, we can't ban you. Yeah. You can't do that now. So I think this is where Max fans need to be a bit careful because they're all going, oh, this is terrible, this rule is terrible. And I'm like, okay, just remember 2021. Like, if you want these precedents set, fine. Yeah. But it's going to backfire. It will backfire. And it did this weekend. Yeah. And again, you know, there's a lot of this nonsense around favoritism and everything. I don't know how many times I have to say this. I'm not a Lando fan as such. I'm certainly not a Lewis Hamilton fan, by the way, which has also been thrown around a lot. The point is, it's just, at the end of the day, what I want is a sport where, look, racing is fair, because that's what I want to see. I want to see both these drivers just go after each other, battle as well as they could. Because again, anyone can just go and check my timeline. And in Austin, when the two were battling, and I was happy. I mean, I tweeted twice or thrice that this is perfect. This is how Formula 1 should be. And that's the whole thing. But when the whole thing gets decided on the basis of a stupid rule, that's where things go wrong. And that's where we actually have to make sure that it doesn't happen.
Yep.
And that's the whole thing, you know. You want a sport where 80-20-21 does not happen. It's as simple as that.
As I said last week, it's you can't have rules that are this easy to game. Because what will happen is if it works out for your driver, you'll be happy, but it's not going to always work out for your driver. And That's what happened over the last 2 weeks. And that's why I was laughing, because I just literally got hounded by everyone when I was like, look, this is a stupid rule and it's going to come back to bite you. And to be honest, I can't help but just laugh now. And the only reason I can laugh now is because they've already basically said we're going to change the rule. So I'm less concerned now. I'm like, right, well, the rule's going to be changed in a couple of races. So fine, done. So now it's just laughter for me. I'm like, right, fuck it, done.
By the way, apparently about that rule, so George Russell let it slip that there were out of the 20 drivers, 19 drivers wanted to bring the change from this weekend onwards. And there was
Who didn't?
There was one.
Max. I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, I mean,
we don't know, but you
he
have
has
to assume.
hold his gun.
Yeah,
he has to hold his gun.
Come on,
right?
there's no way it's Russell who got penalized by it. There's no way it's Bottas because Bottas doesn't care. There's no way it's Lando. Like, I can't see it being Perez, for example. Like, you know, like there's
he doesn't care, right?
Yeah, like none of the other drivers were affected by it to the point where they'd vote against it. And
only one.
Everyone who I would think would go for that rule would be affected negatively by it. Max is the one who, at that point when they did a vote, had won from the rule. So of course it's going to be him.
He could not. I mean, he could not admit that the rule is flawed, right?
No, like if he turned around and said, "Yeah,"
basically boxed into a corner where he has to say that no, the rule's fine.
Yeah, of course.
So that's what happened.
I would be surprised. I'm surprised it wasn't 18, because I'm surprised that Perez would vote against something Max voted for. But I guess
that's true.
You know,
that's true. That's actually, I didn't think on those lines, but maybe that could also.
But maybe I suppose we don't really see behind the scenes. Maybe it is just who's against it, and he didn't know in advance how Max was going to vote and just put his hand up. So
because it's could be basically a hidden thing.
Yeah,
something like that. The whole anonymous ballot kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, moving
That's
on
enough
from
of
this.
that. 50 minutes, that'll do.
Yeah. There's one thing actually. Again, it's pissed me off to a certain extent, because the whole thing. I think I might pull it up. There's this tweet from this ESPN journalist, and he said, I seriously hope he's not deleted the tweet.
Probably not.
Yeah. No, he hasn't. Nate Saunders. Maybe you might know him.
Yeah, I know. He's ESPN guy,
Yeah, the ESPN guy. So he said that, can't believe the British media made Max drive like that. And
okay.
Exactly.
Explain that one.
Yeah. So where it came from was, first of all, the entire nonsense that goes on social media is, let's keep that on one side. Max came up and said that the only problem was probably his nationality, his passport. Yeah. Which is, look, if you say something like that on a Twitch stream, it's fine, because it's still a personal kind of thing, personal space. But when you come out in the media and in front of Dutch media, you say something like this. Look, there are points when it's valid. It wasn't valid here. It's plain and simple. I've been the biggest proponent of the bias in the F1 broadcasting. It needs to end. I've given solutions, everything. I've even had a chance to talk to F1 TV about this. I've spammed a lot of people regarding this thing, that this needs to change, because there is bias in Sky. Leave Sky Sports aside, there's bias in F1 TV as well. There are elements of it which should not be doing this, but they do. This was not it.
No,
the entire nonsense that happened, this was not it. And Brundle
got shit for just discussing the rule, which I was like, that's not bias. He's a racing driver who's commenting on a rule. He didn't even say anything negative about Max. That was my whole point. He was like, and then this weekend he said something negative about Max, and like, oh, here he is with the British bias. And it's like, I mean, there are valid cases where there is British bias, where there is media bias in every sense. And it's not even like, it is, British are probably the main culprits, but we see it in other countries as well. Like, there's definitely some Dutch media bias as well. Like, we see it all the time. It's normal.
I might have to explain this thing again for everyone that's watching. Why the British bias thing comes up this much is, around 80 to 85% of the entire media landscape right now is based out of Britain. Name any top, other than Racing News 365. Maybe no GP fans has its base in Britain. other than maybe one or two publications. Again, leaving the Italian ones aside because they are multi sports based.
They're never biased towards Ferrari either.
Yes. Leaving those aside, every other publication is based out of Britain, and almost 90-95% is basically a British hire. So once you have that, the bias is intrinsic. But the other problem is it's not only intrinsic, it's the editorial direction that they take, which is very, very nationalist, something that Adrian Newey also pointed out. Now, everything on those lines, having all these things in place, I understand, fine. My only argument has been that it's about time we get rid of Sky Sports being the official global broadcaster. We need to change it to F1 TV. And F1 TV's editorial direction can be controlled by F1. FOM
as it
can
should
control
be.
that. Right?
Yeah.
So on that front, we can make a large difference. And that would actually, make the quality of the broadcast better. It won't be biased. I mean, again, bias exists. We know we can literally name the top F1 journos and we can tell which driver they like. We all know them. Carlos Sainz. So
Yeah.
yeah. The point is that on that front, I can understand the entire thing that happened. It has nothing to do with it because the drivers came up and said that what the fuck was going on. We are not in agreement with this rule. Team principals have said that. Other than Red Bull at that time, ironically now Red Bull is the only team that's saying that we need to change the rule. So how the tables turn in just a week. It's just that this is not British bias. And if you're going to basically, put a flag in the ground on this particular thing, you're going to end up on the losing side. Why? Because what you've done is you've taken a word and you've abused it to such an extent that the kind of use there was, it's dead. And it's the whole thing.
For me, it's just, look, the problem is I've kind of given up even caring about it, to be honest with you, because I just think it's like no one wants to have any nuanced conversations anymore with anything. It's just like, this is my side, that's his side, we're doing it this way. So it's like, as you said, when Brundle's just having a conversation about a rule, because it was because it was a British guy having a conversation about a rule that affected a British guy, it was British bias. And my opinion on that was, no, this isn't British bias. This is a racing driver discussing a rule. Yeah. And all of a sudden this week, now that rule affects a Dutch guy, everyone is angry with the rule and saying this is a stupid rule and it can be taken advantage of. And there's no longer a conversation about Brundle being British bias because all of a sudden what Brundle says technically suits Max. So that conversation goes away. So yeah, you're right. Like, look, I got sick of having the conversation because no one wants to have a nuanced conversation. There's points where I'm like, and I've said it before, Ted Kravitz drooling over Lewis Hamilton against Max, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. An international broadcaster shouldn't be acting this way.
Yeah.
But I'm tired of having the argument because people only want to have the argument when it suits them, and when it doesn't, then it's a kind of, that's not British bias. That's just a reasonable. It's like, okay, look, you're just picking and choosing here.
Yeah.
So fine.
I mean, the entire thing, right? Where Anthony Davidson, his video kind of circulated everywhere. Look, Anthony Davidson is saying that. While at the same point, I think a minute later, Jensen Button had actually refuted the whole thing, and they kind of skipped that part. And it's just bad faith.
It's one's not British bias, one isn't, because this one suits me and this one doesn't.
Exactly.
So that's why I'm just sick of having the argument, because British bias definitely exists. But let's talk about British bias. You can't just go, right, there is British bias exists, therefore the whole reason for anything I don't like is therefore British bias.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't work.
Exactly.
The reason as well I've stopped is because it's not just F1, it's in fucking everything now. So I've just given up on it. Like I had an argument with someone about, and I'm not going to go on about this for too long because it's an F1 podcast, but I had an argument with someone on Twitter the other day about the Washington Post not endorsing a candidate in America, right?
Jeff Bezos.
And
right?
and everyone went nuts. They were like, why are they doing it this late? And my point was, one, they're doing it this late because they always decide the candidate this late, so the decision is always made. So that's kind of a non-talking point because the decision was always going to be made around this time. There's nothing different there. So if you're saying this is late, then the last decisions were late as well. But my whole point on it was, I get why you're annoyed and why this looks like some sort of partisan thing, but a media outlet should never be deciding on a candidate. That is an inherent bias where you've decided on your political outlines, and therefore you are no longer news, you are opinion. But the reason I'm just not arsed having these arguments is because, like in F1, those literally you have
There are
a
clicks.
conservative, but you have a conservative media outlet, and I'm like, then it's not a news outlet; it's an opinion
It
outlet.
is. I mean, it is, right? The Daily Wire
News
of
is supposed to
Ben
be
Shapiro,
unbiased.
Fox
Yeah,
News. But again,
but
that's
news.
dead, right? That's dead.
That's
Honestly,
my
that's
point.
dead.
That's my point. There is no longer proper news outlets, because if you're
Yeah,
a news
they don't
outlet,
exist.
by definition, you should be unbiased, reporting the facts in the news.
Yeah.
That, like, we used to
Right now, you just
pretend.
cater to a crowd. That's what you're doing.
Sure,
You're just
and
catering
we
to a
used to
crowd. That's the whole
pretend
thing.
that there was no bias, even though there was a little bit, right? There was a little bit, because obviously Western journalism would always say that, Russian journalism is propaganda even when it wasn't, and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like we've stopped pretending now. It's just like, this is our side, we're taking it, and so this is why,
I
for
mean, the
me,
masks
when it
are
comes,
off. That's the whole thing.
yeah, it's no longer a hidden thing. It's no longer a seedy thing that you call out. It's now just par for the course. And for me, it's like, I've given up on it, because people don't want to actually have the argument about British bias. It is literally just, if it suits me, I'll label it as British bias. If it doesn't suit me, it's not British. Or sorry, if it doesn't suit me, it's British bias. If it suits me, it's not British bias. And thus,
Yeah,
we
but for me, that's
thus we can't have a
the
conversation
fandom.
about it.
Yeah, but the fandom can do that. For me, the bigger question was Max doing it, and him doing it at the worst possible point.
Yep.
Because that had nothing to do with his nationality, and if he's going to make it about that, then there's going to come a point when he needs to make it about this, but he won't be able to, because he's already played the trump card at a wrong
Yep.
point.
Yep.
That's the whole thing.
You can't have
I
that
remember-
argument again. Yeah.
Yeah, remember when the whole thing happened with I think Sky Sports was banned by Red Bull
Yep.
after a race in Austin 2022. Justified. Completely justified.
Yeah.
Because Ted went nuts, honestly.
But by doing
So
what he's
when-
doing here, he's losing the
Credibility.
high ground. He's losing the high
Yeah.
ground. Like, he can't
Yeah.
he can't now turn around and say, I'm not talking to you anymore because of this. Because now it's just like, well, you did the same thing yourself a few months ago, so you no
Yeah.
longer have. This was literally my whole point last week when people were arguing about the rule. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
You can't argue about the rule because it suits you this week and then be angry about it next week. Like, you've made your position, you've made your bed, now fucking sleep in it. Like, tough. Like, you've
Precisely.
already made this tough shit. You can't argue about this week now because it doesn't suit you all of a sudden. Which
Yeah.
is why I laugh so hard at Christian Horner, because Christian Horner last week specifically said the rules are fine.
But
He was
I
ahead of the
understand.
apex.
I mean, look, you
I get it. I
yeah.
get it. But
With Horner,
you're no
I understand.
Longer, no, but I get it. But you're no longer credible. Like,
Yeah.
you cannot argue about Zach Brown last week and saying, oh, he's ridiculous, he's over the top, and then go, oh, but what Christian Horner's doing now is fine. No. It's either both are fine, and we understand it.
wait.
For me, both are fine. I understand it. You're fighting for your driver. You're fighting for your team. That's fine. Absolutely. My point is, anyone who says, like, Zach can't do that last week, and now is like, oh, it's fine when Christian does it. Tough shit. You've made your bed, sleep in it. You cannot look at me straight in the face and be reasonable and go, oh, well, nuance. It's like, no, fuck off. Sorry. You've made your bed, sleep in it. Tough. Like, fuck
Just
off.
wait until next week we have Red Bull's right to review. And
Sure. And there's no new evidence, nothing relevant.
yeah, no, that's
Good
fine.
luck.
The thing is, the kind of backlash that McLaren got this weekend, it's just utter nonsense. I mean, the thing is, when you end up
Desperate
wearing
and
tin
embarrassing,
hats,
I believe, was the description.
yeah. So
And I wonder, when Red Bull do it, will it be desperate and embarrassing? No.
yeah,
It'll be fighting for my driver.
exactly. Again, by the way, just a word on Horner. I think something that has been missed in all of this is Red Bull is starting to act like a team again, and I did not expect that. After a long time, the kind of, maybe it's a bit like adversity brings you together. That kind of situation that they're going through, but it does
Yeah.
appear that the whole unit is acting as how it kind of used. I mean, I still won't say it is everything is working as perfectly as it should, but it's starting to, again, every cog and every wheel is finally starting to align where it is supposed to be, and that's actually good news for Red Bull, and probably a bad news for Toto, who was trying to get Max
Yeah, I think look, Max to Mercedes, unless things really change in 2025, Max to Mercedes is dead in the water because Mercedes have proven that they can't get a grip on these regulations once again. And I think like if Toto didn't get Verstappen on his side when they were winning and Red Bull was nowhere and there was infighting and everything, then unless next year they're like literally fighting for the title, Max isn't going to Mercedes. That dream is dead for anyone who thought so. Sorry, Jos Verstappen, go fuck yourself. Yeah, so
Yeah, that's true. By the way, there's a team that won the race.
oh
I'm
yeah,
wearing the
yeah,
Mercedes
yeah,
thing. You're wearing the
yeah,
Ferrari
yeah,
cap.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
Carlo, this
either
is
way, yes.
Charles Leclerc though, so yeah.
So yeah, you picked the faster driver. That's nothing
I
wrong with
picked the
it.
better driver, just not for this weekend. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Again, the whole weekend. First of all, let's talk about the Carlos Sainz part of it. We'll get to the Leclerc part of it as well. What's your take on the whole thing? How do again for me the question that comes up is every time, and again every time I actually wrote this last weekend as well. Every time after 5 to 6 weekends, Leclerc is out qualified by Carlos. Suddenly, there are people that come out of the woodwork and say he's so underrated. He should be in a better car. He should be in a top car. He is one of the best drivers in Formula One. And again, after 5 6 races, they're again back in their private places, and then they just disappear.
Yeah, yeah.
The point is, how do you correctly rate a driver like Carlos Sainz? Because I think that's important to finally
He is
figure out.
he is the best number two possible. If that's like if you wanted the ideal number two, for me, he's the ideal number two because even when he's fighting Leclerc, like even when the two of them are fighting, you never see them come together properly. It's on the limit, but they don't come together. There's respect between the two of them. And on weekends, on the rare weekends when Leclerc, like this weekend, isn't absolutely on form from the start, Sainz will be there. Like, and
Yeah.
that is the perfect number two. That's they're giving that up for not only a driver who won't act like a number two next year, they are giving it up for a driver who I genuinely think will be less on point against Leclerc than Sainz is at the minute. I'm willing to say that right now. And the reason I say that is not because inherently Sainz is better than Lewis. It's because Sainz is already in the lion's den with Leclerc. He's gotten on top of the car and he performs well when he needs to. And kind of Leclerc is just the better driver. That is the case. Hamilton is going to go into that situation having to learn the Ferrari, get on top of it, coming from a point of low confidence where he is at the minute because George has basically destroyed his confidence all season, even though he's slightly ahead in the points still, but whatever. And I think Leclerc will, over the first 6 or 7 races, absolutely rattle Lewis Hamilton, and all they've paid for is a very expensive number two who won't accept he's number two. So good luck Ferrari next year, by the way. Your problem wasn't the drivers. You've got a brilliant number one and a number two that Red Bull sorely need right now. Like, if Perez was driving anywhere near the level that Sainz is, they would be fine for the constructors right now.
Yeah. It
But
would be sealed by now,
yeah,
right? Again,
yeah.
it's just
The only reason Ferrari is beating Red Bull in the constructors as well, we need to remember, is Leclerc is brilliant, but Sainz has been there or thereabouts every weekend. Look, Leclerc is clearly 2 or 3 steps above Sainz. We've discussed this in the past. He's a far better driver. But Sainz is still a brilliant driver and relatively he's consistent. He's
there's a
kind
bit
of
of
there.
there's a bit of dynamic similar to what there was at McLaren when there was Mika Hakkinen and David Coulthard. That seems to be the case, right? And that's where it kind of seems to, pan out, where there are weekends where Carlos, he has the edge and he ends up winning the races.
Yeah.
But in general, you back the lead driver to actually take over.
Yeah.
I think on that front, everything's perfect. For me, again, there were a lot of people that had a lot of these comments where they said that Carlos will land at Ferrari once again in the future. What's your take on it?
Look, I think if the Lewis Hamilton situation goes poorly, which, look, I really want Lewis to do well next year, but the more and more I watch the season, the more I don't see it. So let's just under the assumption that Lewis doesn't work out and decides to retire fairly quickly, I would not be surprised if they at least offer it to him. But I just don't see it happening. I don't think even Sainz would want to go back there. Maybe it's kind of like,
He would. I mean,
maybe,
again,
yeah.
who knows? I mean, it all depends
Actually,
on
maybe
the
it's the other way
James
around.
Bond's master plan.
You know what? Maybe it's the other way around, because now that I think about it, Ferrari is very poor at accepting they've made a mistake. So that might be the
Yeah.
problem. Yeah. You know what? Scrap what I just said. Sainz would definitely take it, but Ferrari won't offer it. That's what I should have said. But yeah,
And there's
Sainz getting
also
a
this
top tier drive
driver.
though.
Yeah,
Sainz
go
getting
for
a
it.
top tier drive is tough because age is kind of playing against him. It would have to happen fairly quickly.
He's
You know,
he's young, right? He's
he's what,
29.
29, 30? But yeah, but that, like, I know that's young, but when you're not a world champion, as we've seen in the past, even with, Daniel Ricciardo, the likes of him, if you're not a world champion and you're moving backwards instead of forwards, in Formula One, the momentum tends to shift to, I would rather take a punt on this young hotshot driver than give it to this capable pair of hands. Like, that is
Yeah.
general. Like, for
Unless
Red
you're
Bull,
Sauber.
yeah, but for Red Bull, the reason they picked Perez was because they had a Verstappen. They were inherently looking for an experienced number two. If
Yeah.
Red Bull was in the situation, like, look at McLaren's a perfect example. They had Norris. Norris isn't the world champion, so they're going to just put another young driver in there. If Norris had already won 2 world championships, I don't think they're hiring Piastri, for example.
Yeah.
So you need that specific situation, You need to be
What
kind
if
of on the
Williams
back foot.
becomes a front runner?
Then brilliant. Like, amazing for Sainz. Because in that situation, Sainz could end up in a situation where he would win a world title because he would be the de facto lead driver there. It would be kind of like, not to dig at Jenson Button, but I don't think, like, after a while, Jenson Button wasn't the guy that you were like, he's a future Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen. He kind of looked
I
into a
think Button
situation.
redeemed him. Yeah. I think Button redeemed himself when he joined Lewis at McLaren, because when he was joining the team, I think there's this article where Lewis told Button in their first meeting, "I'm taking that one away."
Yeah.
So that's how the whole thing was supposed to be. But then in the 3-year period, Button ended up outscoring him. So yeah, a lot of things changed on that
But
front.
that just proves that Lewis is washed and he's not as good of a driver as everyone thinks he is. That's what that proves.
Partly, yes. Oh
No,
God.
Button is a very good driver, but I think likewise so is Sainz. But I think Button
I don't
and
think Sainz is
Sainz,
as good as Button was.
no, look,
Not even close.
unless Sainz goes on a run like that and proves us wrong. Until that point happens, no. But in both cases, you would say, like, when Button, I remember Button driving that time, and I thought Button was a brilliant driver, likable guy, and I would have said at the same time, off top tier, probably not
Yeah.
quite the, off top tier. And he looked into a situation where he got a title run. And in reality, he could have lost that title run as well, because the second half of the season didn't go brilliantly. Great
Yeah.
documentary with Keanu Reeves on that. If for anyone who wasn't watching the season.
Yeah.
But
Ron,
Sainz,
watch it.
yeah, Sainz is in a similar situation where, like, you wouldn't expect Sainz to get a championship. And if Sainz gets a championship, you would have to assume something has gone horribly wrong for the other teams or horribly right for Williams, to the point where Williams is all of a sudden they've got the 2026 regs perfectly and they go on a run. And in that case, you're probably going to say to yourself, well, Sainz isn't going to get multiple championships. Like, you're not going to think that way.
Yeah.
So that's where it's kind of similar for me. I think Sainz is very underrated, but he's not a top tier driver either. He kind of sits somewhere in the middle,
Yeah.
which is how I feel about Button.
Exactly. I think, in my view, I think this is Sainz's peak in terms of his career. I think this is it.
Yeah,
From
unfortunately
now,
for
what
him,
we are-
yeah.
Yeah. From now we are looking at, unless somehow Williams just transforms itself, which will take time. James Vowles has set the target of 2026 being the year where he starts winning races. That's what he's saying. Again, if that happens or not, it's a big question.
Sorry to interrupt, but if any other team principal said that about a backmarker team, you would laugh. Somehow when it's James Vowles, you're like, interesting. Maybe this will...
Yeah. I mean, you have to. I mean, for anyone who has not seen it, Beyond the Grid, James Wall's latest interview, he has a way with words, and I think I'm actually quite interested in the way he actually, what's the word they use? He enunciates some things which
Yeah.
tend to make linger on with the entire flow of conversation, which is very rare. He would be good with the ladies, I'm pretty sure, the way he's. done
Yeah,
a lot
although
of
he'd
things.
probably be talking to them about data management systems and putting them to sleep. That's the only
Yeah,
problem.
but
Yeah.
it's not what he says; it's how he says it, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, again, we are fanboying over James Walls. Fantastic.
He's a fantastic guy because what I like about James Vels is just he doesn't seem to bullshit though. It's like
Yeah,
he's good with his words, but he also just tells you where it is. Like at the start of the season, he basically said, "Look, we had to fix a lot of stuff over the winter, and we're probably not going to do well until kind of halfway through the season." And what he said is essentially how the season went.
yeah,
Like it took
precisely.
them a long time to catch up, and it looked like they could be 10th on the grid. And everything he said
They're
basically.
what, seventh or eighth right now?
Yeah, I think they're
Something
basically
like that.
fighting towards Haas now, aren't they? Is where they are.
Yeah, towards RB. Ours is gone.
Towards RB.
Ours is
Yes, sorry.
P6 now. Yeah.
Thanks to
Anyhow,
Hulkenberg.
just to sum up with the Carlos thing. The reason why I'm saying that this is the peak for him is how many drivers do you think, in terms of talent, performance overall, are better than Carlos right now,
Better than
or in
Charles,
their
you mean?
career peak?
Or
Sorry?
or Carl? Do you mean better than Charles Leclerc or better than
No,
Carlos?
Carlos. Carlos.
Oh, on the grid at the minute, there's probably we talked about this in the past. Probably six,
Yeah,
and one
six,
of
seven.
those, unfortunately, is driving an Aston Martin.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
he's
there are.
no he's much older than his peak, but he's still driving brilliantly.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
there are seven drivers, by the way. Max, Leclerc, Lewis, Alonso, Norris, Oscar, and Russell. These are the seven drivers.
yeah,
Next season, we'll have Kimi Antonelli and Ollie Behrman making the grid.
yeah,
And I think their peak in terms of the level at which they can perform, I think it's higher than Carlos. So
yeah,
there are nine drivers in terms of pure talent that are better than him. And
yeah.
then you
And,
have a
and
Franco Colapinto.
I will point out as well, I would agree with that list, and I agree with Lewis being better than Sainz. And people will probably go, but earlier you said that Sainz will do better in Ferrari. And my whole point is, sure, but Lewis has to now go and embed in Ferrari,
Yeah.
which Sainz has done, over the last 3 to 4 seasons. So, like, he's had time to do it. Lewis is going
Yeah.
to jump in. That's why I think year one for Lewis won't go well. And I just wonder how long he'll stick around after that. Definitely into 2026, but year one, I don't think will go
Yeah.
well. So I'm not
Yeah.
saying Sainz is better. I'm just saying Lewis has a lot to contend with next year that Sainz is already
Precisely.
Sainz is already mentally adapted to. This is Leclerc's team. I'm here.
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah. Precisely.
Yeah,
Exactly. And now just
yeah.
to round it all off, I think this is one of the reasons why I think that is it for Carlos in terms of being a part of the top team, unless Williams completely turns things around.
Or
Because
Max
there are
leaves in. If Max leaves and they really need someone, and
they'd rather go for someone else. I don't. I mean,
maybe.
Horner has already said that he had conversations with Alonso, and on current form, maybe I don't know. But the thing is,
The problem with that is, like, if Max leaves Red Bull, right, you have to assume that none of the other guys are going to jump to that ship because they're basically going to a sinking ship. So it's only going to be someone further down the field. And if Alonso looks at
could be Russell.
if Alonso looks at Max leaving,
Yeah.
unless Max is replacing him at Aston, then I don't see Alonso going there. If Max is replacing him at Aston, then obviously
Where
it's
is Max going? That's also the question, right?
taking a year off, I think, personally.
I don't think he'll do that. I think he's slowly
Or he goes
understood
to
the
Mercedes.
entire thing.
Yeah, if
That
he goes to
replaces
Mercedes,
Russell,
then
right?
maybe Russell. Yeah,
There's a direct swap in that
yeah.
case.
Because I
They've
don't
already
think
said.
I don't think either of the McLaren guys. Like there was news that Piastri was talking to Helmut Marko. Like genuinely, maybe that's true. But what people seem to
No, it
forget is the
isn't.
drive.
Oscar has said
Oscar
that.
said it's not. But
It does
even
not-
if his
there-
management team were talking to them, we need to remember the management teams talk to every team to see what the situation is. That's their job.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like Lewis, for example, last year said I never talked to Red Bull, and then we found out his dad had been on the phone to Christian. So, like
Yeah.
this shit does happen all the time, but it doesn't mean like Oscar would not leave McLaren right now for Red Bull. That would be a really silly decision at the moment.
Precisely.
So.
And that's exactly. So that's where the whole thing comes up. For me, I just don't see. Just to sum it up, I don't see Carlos.
I think something would have to
Going
go
to a
horribly
top
wrong,
team.
right? Something
Yeah.
would have to go wrong at the top teams.
The
Like,
problem
he-
is, it's not only that. The problem is the grid is too talent dense right now. Earlier, what
Yeah.
used to happen was there were 3 to 4 elite talents, and then there were the middling drivers, and then there were the experienced ones who were just past their sell-by date, and then
Yeah.
you had the pay drivers. Now there are no
Yeah.
pay drivers. There are elite talents, 8 to 9 drivers that are
There's one
just
pay driver.
brilliant.
But anyway.
Which one? Joe?
He's not really a pay driver, but he's just, his
Yeah.
dad owns the team, so it's essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
He's a different category anyways. So yeah, just to add, just to sum it up, I just don't see it happening anymore. I think Carlos is in the same boat as a Gasly or an Ocon or I would have said Albon, but I don't know how good he is right now because he's somewhat imploding.
It's similar. Albon, unfortunately, at the moment for me is kind of similar to Yuki in that I thought both of them were proper top tier talents, and more so Albon than Yuki.
I never thought Yuki was.
Sorry,
you're the one.
Top tier talents is not what I meant, but I thought they were really excellent racing drivers.
Yeah.
Yuki, after losing to Daniel when Daniel's not at his best, or not losing, but being basically on par with Daniel, has kind of made me go, and then when Lawson comes in and is basically just wrangling him out of the car, it's kind of like, right,
let's see.
I'm not so
Let's
sure
see what happens with them.
Albon's kind of the similar case where Albon looked brilliant, but now all of a sudden you've got Franco Colapinto, and it's like, I'm not.
He's not taken the whole. Yeah, I think he's not taken the whole challenge from the teammate thing very well. I think that's where the whole problem comes in.
I don't know who said it. Maybe it was Tom Holland, or it was I can't remember who said it over the last week.
The Spider-Man?
No, not that Tom Holland. What's his Tom from F1? Is he not Tom Holland as well? Tom Clarkson. That's the one. Sorry, my bad. He said it well, which was kind of I wonder if he kind of thought he'd have this runway before Sainz came in, and he was prepping himself for Sainz, and now it's like Colapinto comes in and he's feeling the pressure the same way he did in Red Bull, and the confidence is kind of out of whack all of a sudden, because Albon's a very, very good driver, but once his confidence goes, we've seen in Red Bull, that's it. Like, it just he's not very good at building that confidence back up again.
Yeah.
So this could be could be a punch in the face before Sainz comes in and gives him a left hook. Like, this could go really, really wrong.
Yeah, really fast. Yeah. That's also the problem with him. Anyways, coming back to the Ferrari part,
sorry.
I was slightly disappointed with the way the whole Charles Leclerc race weekend was managed, because again, there was something that Leclerc said as well afterwards. He said that he didn't really have any time to actually run the car. He only had I think it was only FP3 that he had, where again there were some issues and he couldn't really have a complete. Basically, he could not fine-tune his setup. He had no running experience, nothing. And it was straight into the qualifying, and he was never comfortable with the car. And and he said that that's one of the biggest reasons why he just could not really keep up with Carlos.
It's a tricky track as well to do so, because the downforce levels are completely out of whack compared to normal. So you're kind of...
Yeah.
You're piling on massive... Like Monaco downforce levels at a track that's as fast as Monza. So it's really difficult for them to get those things right. And I think, that lack of running really probably hurt him.
Yeah, for me, that's the whole thing, because again, the Pirelli 1.5 hour test that they had, it was an utter waste of time for drivers, to be honest, because they couldn't really learn anything from it. But the thing is, when it's not as if out of the blue Pirelli told that there will be a 90-minute test. It was something that was planned earlier. So when there is something that is planned for FP2, why would you have a young driver in the car in FP1? That's not smart planning in any which way. And
I was very surprised they did that to Norris as well, because he not only is in a title fight, but he like, I get they have to swap them out at one, but at a weekend where you have the test and they're putting a new floor on, I was like, well, this is an odd time to be doing this.
Yeah, like, how does it make sense? And if there had been a crash or something, just imagine where the whole thing actually pans out. And again, it didn't really hamper Norris much, I'd say. It hampered Leclerc a lot, because he was... You could see with his flying laps, he was not comfortable with the car, and he did close the gap throughout the qualifying, but again, you can only do so much.
Unfortunately, that's luck as well, because you can have less time like Norris did, but McLaren just knew where to set up the car and they got it right.
Yeah.
But easily that could go the opposite way, like it possibly did for Leclerc, where you think you know what you're going to do, it doesn't work out, now you've got no time to fix it, and that does seem to be where
And
Leclerc was. Yeah.
you're risking it, right? You're basically playing with fire, and that is something which is not advisable for, especially against your lead driver. How does it even make sense?
It's strange to do it as well when Leclerc, even though it is a very, 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 very outside chance at a title, there is still a sniff at a title.
Yeah, exactly.
And like we've said with Norris and Max, things could go wrong. Like, they could easily go wrong. And it's strange for a team like Ferrari with a clear number one driver to kind of put that pressure on. You would think, like, it's okay, we've got the test this weekend, so let's do the young driver at a later race for Leclerc and put them in Sainz's car this weekend, for example.
Do it in Vegas, do it in, maybe not do it in Abu Dhabi because it's the last race, but do it. There are 3 other weekends. Yeah. Just do it do it at that time, and that's the basic key operational areas where I think Fred Vasseur is not as aggressive as maybe the other team principals. He's very he's laid back again. He's brought the results and everything is fine. But when it comes to the sharp edge, you don't leave things on the table. I think
I'm genuinely surprised with these. I'm genuinely surprised, and I don't understand why these teams. Maybe there's a reason behind it, but I don't understand why these teams, like at the start of the season, when Red Bull were essentially dominating and it looked like it was just going to be another 2023. I would have been in my mind like, okay, well, right now we're just developing, nothing to lose. Let's get those younger driver things out of the way. Just get them done. So they're not playing in later in the season. I don't understand why that. Maybe because of that, they assume, well, it's a write-off season, so it doesn't matter when we do it. That's the opposite. But for me, it's like, if it doesn't matter when you do it, surely let's just get it out of the way.
Get it out of the way.
In case something happens later in the season,
Exactly. And this could have been a Charles Leclerc win, and that's another 10-point swing for him. These are the things that they won't think about it right now, but if it's a close championship, this is going to hurt you a lot.
If there's like a mechanic, like if Red Bull decide not to take a penalty, and which they probably will, but if they made that mistake and they got a DNF, like there's a 25-point swing for Leclerc at another race. And it sounds outside, but it's only like, what is it? It's 71 points. That is a lot for 4 races, and it's probably unachievable for 4 races. However,
it could have been 61, by the way, if
exactly.
They had actually done that. So
61, and then like if there's 2, like, which again could happen, if there's 2 DNFs for Red Bull, they're going to be kicking themselves for not doing that now.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine 61-point gap, and at 47-point gap, we are saying Lando has a bright chance. 61 points is it's not out of the blue, and that's how actually a team needs to think. You don't. And that's where, when they talk about the fact that maybe Ferrari will be fighting for the title next season, they might in terms of car performance, but in terms of mentality, strategy, and all these areas, they are just not there.
And and I think this simple way to look at this was, people very quickly say, oh, the title is over, right? Now for Norris, they said last week, for example. And I was like as well, it's probably over unless Lando changes something dramatically. Yeah. Maybe it feels like maybe he has now, so let's see. It could be off again next weekend. But we have to, if we're going to fault McLaren for not knowing they're in a title fight and not knowing it's on early in the season and throwing away points, then you have to fault Ferrari for going and giving up on a title fight at this point. It's on until it's not at all times. Like, it's basically until you are mathematically not able to win, then you need to fight like you're in it. And McLaren and Ferrari have kind of made opposite mistakes here, where it feels like Ferrari have said it's over when it's not, and McLaren didn't know when it started. And they're both they both may be giving Red Bull a free championship,
Just actually, I was just looking at the point standings. If Leclerc did not have that dip after Monaco, so during that Monaco period, after Monaco, there were 4 races: Canada, Spain, there's Austria, and then there's Britain. In these 4 races, Leclerc scored 12 points.
Jesus.
Imagine how many Max scored. Max scored 86 points.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you want to know the biggest strange thing about this season, right?
Yeah.
If McLaren hadn't have made all the silly mistakes and, not driver swapping,
would be already leading the championship.
He'd be 1 point off by my calculation after this weekend. 1 point off.
Is it? He would be ahead. I think he would be
No, because
ahead.
before
47
Austin,
points, right?
I did the whole calculation and it worked out. Before Austin, there would have been 11 points difference between the two of them. So if we assume everything goes exactly as is, right now
Yeah,
there would be 1 point difference between the two of them. And if there was
just
a one
imagine.
point difference with 4 races to go where Red Bull is, it would be like Max is like
Yeah, it's
he's going to
done.
need something, miraculous. So
Yeah.
I think regardless how this season ends, McLaren have a lot to answer for now. Like, a lot to
I
answer
think,
for now.
yeah, but again,
Unless they win,
I'm
in which
slightly more
case it's like
sympathetic to
fine.
McLaren. Yeah, but I'm slightly more sympathetic to McLaren because this is the first time they're in a title battle since
It's
2012.
2000. Yeah, yeah,
12.
yeah,
And that's a long time. And this will be their first title in the 21st century, by the way.
yeah.
The first
Whereas
constructor title.
Ferrari have lost a lot of them over the last few years, and you think they would
Yeah.
have learned from that. McLaren have that excuse that they weren't expecting to be in a title fight,
They didn't,
and
yeah, yeah.
which
No one
is fair.
expected them to
No
be
one
in.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's
you're
just
right.
exactly
Ferrari have no excuse. No excuse.
precisely.
You know.
Ha,
Yeah.
enough with that, by the way. Next up, I think maybe a bit, let's touch on it a bit. What the fuck is going on with Mercedes right now? They
Eh,
are using different floors. There's one race we hear that it's a
sabotage.
Barcelona floor, then there's
Yeah.
some other floor, then this, that. There's mix and match and everything is going on. And again, I have no idea what happened to George Russell during the race after the first pit stop, where he came out and he had a broken front wing. The flap was gone. So
Yeah.
it's what's going on with that team. And again, it's you kind of predicted it, right?
Yep. I'm always right. I just like to point that out. No, I felt like Mercedes' year just felt eerily similar to the last two seasons, where there's just this constant flux where Mercedes themselves, and it's not just us watching, it seems to always be Mercedes themselves as well, seem to think they've got everything figured out, and then immediately don't have everything figured out. And then
Yeah.
they go into this situation where they're like, oh, we thought we had it done. We don't understand. And then they try everything. Things get worse. And then in Brazil, for example, next week or in one of the races over the next four, they'll like be on the podium and be like, oh, we know what we've done. We've fixed it now. And then we'll get to 2025 and they'll be nowhere in the first race. And they'll be like, what happened to Mercedes? It's just constant. I don't know what it is, but it genuinely, it feels like they perhaps have some fundamental issues with their aero like development, and because they won a race or two like in 2022, they're unwilling to kind of face head on, okay,
Yeah.
these are fixed or this is wrong, like they're unwilling to basically take it off. I think the saving grace for Mercedes, and again, I know I'm going to upset Hamilton fans here, I think the saving grace for Mercedes might be that for 2025 Hamilton isn't there, because there will be a kind of a
Reset.
lessened pressure where they could turn around to Russell and Antonelli and be like, look, let's write this year off and let's focus on next year and let's just learn what we can from this year. And there
Yeah.
won't be the pressure from Hamilton to be like, this could be my last season. I want to win a race. It'll be like, let's just focus on what we need to. Because I feel like when
Yeah.
Hamilton's there, they've got this pressure to win right now that they won't when he's gone. Maybe
Yeah.
that's part of the reason. Maybe that's like they can't give up for a season before. And also this year they've got, actually, they could backfire as well, because next year they probably want to prove to Hamilton that he's made a mistake, so that could go wrong for them as well.
I mean, there's luck for that. There's Ferrari for that. So I mean, you can always count on them. So
I think Mercedes fundamentally have an issue with their aero development. You know what's interesting about it as well? This is completely just anecdotal data and just conspiracy theory-esque, but McLaren stopped using their wind tunnel and started winning. Aston Martin are using their wind tunnel and they can never correlate
McLaren
things, and
didn't
they're
use
very up and down.
Mercedes wind tunnel, right?
They use the Toyota one, sorry. Yeah.
Cologne, yeah.
Right. Yeah, never mind then. I was just going to say, because it's like McLaren get their own wind tunnel and start winning, right, with the Mercedes engine. Aston Martin are having the same issue as Mercedes, which is they're constantly just up and down, but at a different
Yeah.
level. So it's like maybe there's something fundamentally wrong with the wind tunnel.
But the car is still winning. The thing is, I think there's something similar to what happened with them earlier in the year, where when they started the season, the car was too far back. But then I think it was probably Canada when the Monaco, where they brought the front wing and things just clicked.
Yeah.
I think it's just that they are one silver bullet away from catching up. I think
See,
that's where I kind of see them. I think maybe
think the
they're just
opposite. I think
one
they're.
step away.
I think
Okay.
the opposite. They're always looking for silver bullets. I think that's the problem. And I thought that was
Yeah.
over with James
I mean, it's
Allison, but
silver
it's
arrows, right? So they have to.
yeah, yeah.
Plus,
I
again,
I mean,
the bigger problem is James Allison has not designed any of the cars until now.
yeah,
This was a
yeah.
car that was previously designed, and his first car would be the 2025 car. And
From scratch, yes,
maybe,
yeah, from
yeah,
scratch.
and maybe that's where you see the final change. Again, I'm
Maybe,
not writing off Mercedes, because what Mercedes showed this season was an ability to, if there is even a sniff of a win, they're going to win,
yeah,
which is drastically different from a McLaren or a Ferrari, honestly.
yep,
Because they
yeah,
are,
yeah.
you basically need to just hand it to them that, okay, fine, just don't fuck it
They
up and
will
win.
still throw away a guaranteed win at times, yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas Mercedes,
Because,
you just know won't. Yeah, same with
yeah,
Red Bull.
because
If Red Bull or
exactly.
Mercedes have a win, it's done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because Mercedes should have had probably just one win this season, and they've had three. And I don't even remember how many Ferrari or McLaren should have had, and they've not. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of that. That's where I think once you have those bases in place, if you ultimately check this particular box, maybe that's going to help you improve. I don't know. It's just I think once Lewis is gone, there will be a reset, and
A
maybe I think
rebuilding,
it will be a
yeah.
good thing for them. Yeah,
I think,
I think it will
like,
be a good thing for them.
I said something that a lot of people got angry at me for earlier in the season, which is
How
I think
often does it happen, by the way?
it's every week. It's every week, and I will say I'm usually right, so fuck you. Um, not you specifically, the people
Yeah,
who
I know.
argue with me. I've
Because
said
more
for a
often than not, we
while,
end up on the same side. So that's
yeah, but I've said for a while, I wonder is there kind of a fundamental kind of issue with their aero development in general, like something that basically they've never been the best aero team, even when they were dominating. Like, there was always either Ferrari or Red Bull had a better aero car, and it was kind of the engine that made up the difference. And the
I
fact that they operated, like we've said, they've always operated perfectly. They will get the best result of what's available at every weekend all the time. Like, this is how good the car is, this is what we'll get. That's kind of who Mercedes are. Whereas the aero department for them has never been perfect, and we are now in a situation where the aero is at a point where even Red Bull, who have traditionally been the best aero team, have said that these regulations are difficult and that upgrades can be downgrades. So if Red Bull, who are traditionally a rock solid aero team, even with Newey going, are having issues and had issues last year while Newey was there, so it's not just Newey leaving. If they struggle in these regulations, then for me, it's like, of course, Mercedes are going to struggle, which is why I think there may be just a kind of fundamental limitation in their aero department. And I don't think 2026 is going to fix that, because I don't think the engine's going to be a silver bullet like it was last time, personally. So
yeah, no, yeah, that's
hopefully
more.
they can fix that. Hopefully James Allison will find the issue and fix it now, because he is a very, 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 very talented engineer, and
Yeah,
leader.
I think for me, I do not subscribe to the notion that Mercedes did not have a strong aero unit,
No, they
because
have
I think
strong. I'm just saying not the best.
I'd say the 2018 Mercedes was probably, it was one on aerodynamics. It was not one on power unit, because
Maybe,
there's
maybe.
I think we saw because the Ferrari power unit was better, and I think the second half of the season we saw just Mercedes just take off, and Ferrari was
Yeah.
nowhere.
I don't know though. I think the
It's
Ferrari
just
aero was very good. I think 2018 was more
it was
execution than
good.
anything. Yeah, but it was
Yeah, but the car
execution is what
was
lost that race that year.
yeah, but the second half of the season had only one pole position from Ferrari. There were, I
Yeah,
think, 10
that's
or
true.
11 races. So when once that happens, you know where it's going.
Yeah.
Anyways, regardless of that, for me, uh, do you think they will drop off? They'll just write off the 2025 season and just focus on 26? Because I don't think they'll approach it that way. Toto does not think on those lines. He never has.
Probably not, but they should, I think. I think there's no reason for them to fight for the 2025 season. Like, unless in 2025 they show up with a car that could fight for the title from the get-go, I think it's
I think they
pointless
could,
for them.
right? Don't you think they could?
Maybe. And like if they show up at Bahrain in 2025 with a car that is fighting for the win, right? If that is the case, then understandably I would say, right, well, you know, one in the hand's better than two in the bush. So yes, fight for this season. That makes sense. But if they show up in Bahrain with the fourth fastest car, I would say after round 3, if you're like fourth in the constructors and the other guys are clearly ahead, I think at that point it's like, right, there is no point putting any more development into this season.
Yeah.
Like it's pointless because other teams like Aston behind you won't. Like they will not put a single. Alonso has admitted this. He's like, we are not going to put any development into 2025 after this year. Basically, we're done because there's no point. So I think if Mercedes are fourth fastest,
if anything they put it actually makes the car slower. So
it's a waste. Yeah, but also it's a waste for them because they're not going to win the title. So what's the point? You know.
Yeah.
So if Mercedes are winning, then sure they should play the game. But if Mercedes are like behind Red Bull, Ferrari, and McLaren, then they have a struggle because if they develop in 2025, they are potentially putting themselves in a situation where they're even further down in 2026. You know what I mean? Because the other teams clearly understand the aero better. And if they don't get on top of that and the other teams have good engines, then all of a sudden they're not just behind McLaren, Ferrari and Red Bull. They're behind Aston Martin, potentially Williams if they do their job right and right off the season. You know, like all of a sudden you're way down the order. And if Mercedes ends 6th in 2026, like Toto could be very well packaged up and sent out the door. Like, you know, that would be terrible.
But I don't really see that happening with them. I don't know. It's just again, I feel what's going to happen is I think what's going to happen is all these works teams are going to rise once again. It's going to be a Mercedes, Ferrari, to an extent Red Bull and Aston Martin. I think these are the 4 teams that will be there. I'm not sure where McLaren will be because again McLaren has a handicap. It's a customer team, so it does not know the inside track of what's going on with the power unit.
I think the works teams, if they operate at 100%, should be ahead. But I kind of think with the way the new engine regulations work for customers, if you're a team like McLaren who's gotten everything else together, I don't think it's a huge handicap anymore because they have to supply you in real time the current engine. Like it's not like before where, you know, you would get the engine and they'd give you the map that's like 20 horsepower slower. And, you know, they would give you the engine from 6 months ago.
Right? Don't you think so? I mean, all the works teams are going to put something in place where
it's going to be
have an advantage.
Where it's going to be advantageous is packaging. Like they're going to be able to package it exactly around their aero development platform. So McLaren could be a little bit behind because Mercedes will have the upper hand in packaging.
Exactly.
But that said,
still a lot of. I think 2026 is going to be a year where either McLaren realizes that it cannot work as a customer team, or it will be a surprise for all of us where we see a customer team being dominant. Because it's going to be either of the two sides. It's not going to be. We're not going to see a scenario where it's still a middling situation where McLaren finds itself
it depends on the differences between the engines and how important the aero is. Like that's what the unknown is really. Because if like the thing is, Mercedes could get the engine perfect and completely misunderstand the active aero regs, right? Given how they've been so up and down and inconsistent the last 3 years. And it could be a case where the active aero regs are far more important than the engines because the engines are all kind of similar. And Mercedes or McLaren get that spot on, and they're fighting with like an Aston Martin who get it spot on. And this is two customers because the engine isn't that important, but the aero is massively important who get it right. So we could have a 2009 in that situation where the aero is just so much more important than any engine supplier is. You know what I mean? So as long as you have a decent engine, the engine doesn't matter. And I think it could be a case where all of the engines are kind of decent. Red Bull is the unknown there because they've never developed an engine before. Sure, but I think the thing is, I'm not as concerned about Audi's engine, just because Audi have developed engines for a very, very long time. Red Bull haven't.
I don't think that makes any difference. I'll be honest with you.
Maybe not.
Just look at Honda, what happened with them.
Sure, maybe not. But I would say if you think that Audi are going to be off, then by the same logic, you would have to assume that Red Bull could just as easily be very well off. Because neither of them have developed an F1 engine.
Because Yeah, but there's a reason why I think that won't be the case, because the Red Bull powertrain is probably one of the first that started working on the whole
Sure. Yeah, yeah,
new
it's an
regulations
advantage.
much
Yeah.
earlier than everyone else. Secondly,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people underestimate the kind of workforce that is already in place. They basically picked
Hmm.
up 30% of Mercedes HPP. So they are
Yeah.
not dummies, right? So they've got the people in place. Maybe it will in start at the beginning there will be some growing pains which can be expected, but I won't be surprised if we end up seeing a Red Bull powertrain being the benchmark in Formula
To be
1.
honest with
I
you,
really
even
won't
if
be.
the good thing for Red Bull, I think that the key for Red Bull is just even if it's short term pain, I think it was the right decision anyway. So even
Yeah,
if they end up like third in 2026 because of an engine issue, I think people will laugh and be like, "Oh, you shouldn't build your own engines." And my response would be, "Give it time." Like
yeah.
this is better than them being reliant on a
2014.
manufacturer who could just
Yeah,
leave at any point.
yeah.
At least it's in
True.
their own hands; they can fix it.
Exactly. And
It
I think
makes more.
that's their
That's the
thought process as
advantage.
well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Funnily, I mean, we are at Red Bull. Let's talk about the Red Bull second driver seat, because a
Oh
lot
Christ.
of,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, okay, so Liam Lawson in 2 weekends, what he's done is he's pissed off Fernando Alonso, he's
Yeah.
pissed off Sergio Perez,
Yeah.
and he's pissed off Franco Colapinto.
Yeah.
Now, when all of this has happened, he's also been summoned by, I mean, the videos are already there. He's been summoned by Christian Horner and Helmut Marko separately, where he's had a good talking to in terms of his attitude, apparently. Sergio Perez said that he has an attitude of someone. I don't remember. He had some very very ruthless comments. But what's what's your take on it? I'll
I
give
did
my take
I
later.
did find Perez's comments interesting because he said, "Oh, it's one penalty for one driver." Essentially, something like, "Oh, it's penalties depending on who the driver is." He said when he was talking about the Lawson incident at Mexico, and my response was, "You should probably talk to your teammate about that because they seem to feel the same way." Yeah, I think Lawson needs to be careful because I think like in terms of just sheer talent and pace, I think he's the better decision than Yuki. But I said this last week. The problem they're going to have is like one of the reasons why Yuki never got a chance, even though he clearly has some underlying talent
Yeah,
there, is because of his attitude. And Lawson should immediately look at that and be like, right, it's not good enough just to be fast on track. I also need to play the team game at all points and be cool and level headed because Gasly and Albon are clearly two very good drivers, but because of mental, attitude, they just threw away their chance at Red Bull. Yuki hasn't got a chance because of that, and now Lawson could be in the same situation. And so that's where Lawson, I think, needs to be careful because clearly they take attitude very seriously, or at least one person does. Horner takes attitude very seriously. Helmut Marko seems to care a
Marco
bit
does
less
as
about
well.
it. He does,
Yeah,
but he
he
wanted
also had.
Yuki in.
No,
Like
yeah, even he said the same thing, right? That this kind of things is probably not acceptable because you're basically screwing your own team. And I think Red Bull would not have thought this much about it if it was not for the fact that Ferrari leapfrogged them.
yeah,
And I think Checo would have finished P7, something like that. He was ahead of Oscar, so probably
yeah.
something on those lines, which is again, it's not great, but considering where Max finished, P7 would have been good.
I think Red Bull. I, I just can't understand if Red Bull keep Perez now. I just can't understand the logic because you could say like, okay, this race didn't go well
Look,
for him
it's
and so
no, no,
on, but it's
that's
every
fine.
weekend it's the same thing. So Perez has to go, right?
Okay,
Regardless, I think.
okay.
You think so or not?
My Who will they put alongside Max? And
This is what I'm saying.
I think
This is the
what they've
issue that they
shown this
have.
weekend is, and I think it's very surprising because Liam, more often than not, throughout his F2 and even in general, has come off as a very laid back kind of a character. So, and again, what I got to know in the paddock is Liam is apparently being flagged by a lot of team members as well as a disrespectful person in terms of he seems to have an
Right.
attitude problem. Again,
Yeah. Yeah.
how much we can verify on it, I don't know. But there seems to be a case. This seems to be a trend. And what has happened is Alonso does not usually come up and say stuff like this for anyone. When Alonso
Especially not
said
young
that,
drivers. In fairness,
yeah,
he says it about people he's had beefs with, but young
yeah,
drivers, Not really.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
for Alonso to come up and say something like this, then for Sergio Perez, and Sergio Perez is not someone who tends to
Who's
have beefs
Alonso
with drivers.
managing, actually?
Colapinto and Bortoleto.
Well,
I
well,
doubt. I mean, I don't think that has anything to do with it. He'd
maybe.
rather put himself in that Red Bull if it
Maybe
came
he's
to
playing
it.
4D chess, you know?
I mean, if he was, he's not playing it well
If
because he's
Colapinto
still
ends up in the
yet
Red
to.
Bull seat, then I will be like, well done. Well done.
Yeah, if he does. I mean, if Williams let him go, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
big question for now. And anyways, the point was that if there are three different drivers that have said that you have an attitude problem, the problem is
Yeah.
not entirely. Again, you can have an attitude problem. You can be a cunt off track, but then you have to be a Max Verstappen or a Lewis
That's
Hamilton
which he's
or a
not.
Charles
Yeah.
Leclerc, which
Yeah,
is not.
yeah, which he's not.
That's
He's
the
a
problem.
brilliant.
And
He's a very, very capable driver, but he's not like
he's a
not the
solid
next.
driver. He's
He's not the next future world champion that you're like,
Yeah.
okay, we can put up with this. You know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
thing. And I think what Red Bull has seen in the last 2 weekends is he's too willing to get into scuffles where there's no need to get into scuffles. And when you're hot-headed, it does not necessarily mean that you'll be hot-headed only against your opponents. It might be towards your team as
But
well.
you know what? Like
And
this is why I think
Red Bull
Horner's
has
not going to.
faced that with Pierre Gasly.
Yeah. This is why I don't think they're going to put him in now almost immediately, because what has changed between Lawson last year and this year when he filled in? Lawson last year when he filled in was calm, cool and collected because essentially he was auditioning for the chance of the seat at VCARB. Now he's 100% immediately. The obvious reason he's in there is he's auditioning for Perez's seat. It's a different level of, okay, this is a different audition. I need to prove it. And as much as his driving has been, I think, quite good, I think like if he was just aggressive with Perez at that turn, it'd be like, that's kind of the guy we want. We want someone who's willing to fight for it. But as you said, they don't want someone who can be easily kind of wound up off track and in the car, because that's going to happen to you every weekend as Verstappen's teammate. And if the confidence for Perez, who's a seasoned driver, can be thrown this easily, it can easily happen for a young driver. So they need someone mentally 100%. And I think that's where, if he has any, like, it could already be too late because we know how quickly Horner and Helmut make decisions. Like, Horner could have seen this and gone, I'm not even taking a chance now. That's it. I'm done.
Yeah.
Horner could have been on the phone to Ricciardo after that race and been like, listen, it's an outside chance, but get your boots ready. Like, this could be incoming. You know,
Exactly.
like, that's how quick Horner and Helmut make decisions that people don't like, but that could easily happen.
Yeah. And I don't think that'll be... I think it would be foolish anyways to put him after 6 races, because that's just... You're screwing him over big time. Honestly, it doesn't make any sense to put any young driver next to him. Yeah,
I think they were hoping they could, but I think he's already shown that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
And I'm on the same boat, I'm genuinely surprised by that, because when, like, I kind of said, right, his attitude is good. Like, after seeing him last year, I thought, this is a guy who can take the pressure. He's calm, he's cool, he's collected. If he just goes on track and absolutely destroys Yuki, he's got that seat. And ironically, he's destroyed Yuki, but his attitude, the one thing that I thought was perfect.
Destroyed Yuki either, right?
He's doing very well, though. If he continues this way,
he's doing well. He's on the pace.
It's 2-0 now, isn't it?
No. It's, how is it 2-0 in terms of
beating him in a Grand Prix?
I mean, Yuki didn't last more than a lap.
No, sure, but
Yuki was ahead as well, right? Yuki was, I don't know, he was P9, P10. The point is, it's not really.
But Yuki got into a collision and dropped out. And even if it's not Yuki's fault, you know Red Bull will just be like, well, that's his attitude, too aggressive.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? Yeah, but that's the problem. On one side, you have this. On the other side, you have this hothead. And
sure,
and
that's
then
my point.
You have an underperforming Mexican in the team who is...
But that's my point about
Checo
Lawson.
looks so resigned, isn't it?
But that's my point about Lawson. It's Lawson had to do two things: perform on track and have his attitude in check. Yeah. And I think, in fairness, out of 2 of the races so far, sure, like, Tsunoda was ahead, but Tsunoda crashed out. The exact same thing Perez is doing. So you would say in that situation, Lawson on track has performed better for the 2 races, but he is mentally not showing what he needs to. And that immediately for Horner is the red flag, because I didn't realize Yuki had never even tested a Red Bull. I assumed he had at some point.
It was such a shocker for me as well.
This is how quick Horner basically just writes it off. He's like, nope, not good enough. And in fairness, he generally seems to be right about it.
Correct.
You know? Yeah. So I think once he makes his mind up, his gut instinct is where he is.
Yeah, but I think the problem with Red Bull is they don't have options. What are they going to do?
It's
basically Daniel, right? I don't think there's.
They should have gone with Sainz. Like, they had the option and they decided not to because Jos Verstappen's a prick. So, Jos Verstappen and Carlos Sainz Sr. is a prick. Both of them are pricks.
Exactly.
And to be honest, Horner, I think in that situation, Horner probably should have put his foot down and said, look, you two, I don't care who's in the car, like, we need to win this constructors. But he's trying to keep Max happy, so he's between a rock and a hard place.
Exactly.
You know? So in that situation,
I don't know what they do. I think
Ricardo. That's the only option left. Like, what else do they do?
It's basically, you know what's going on is basically, here's shit 1, shit 2, shit 3, shit 4. You're basically replacing shit with shit. Again, with all due respect to everyone, but you're replacing one shit with another one. That's all you're doing. You don't have good options. What they need to do, I think, I won't be surprised if it's still Sergio Perez next season. I seriously think
I think it'll be one of two things. It'll either be Perez or Ricardo next year. I can't see anyone else that they're going to go with.
I don't see Lawson getting that one.
Because
ideally, ideally what would be the best approach would be bring Daniel in, give him the first half of the season. In that first half, you analyze how Lawson is doing in the other car. And if Lawson is showing you something, swap him. But if he's not, then just continue with this.
See, I just don't think... I think Red Bull make their decision after 6 races on Lawson. So I just don't see the point in... If they've... Like, as much as I think it's a silly decision, I can't see... If Lawson doesn't tell them what they need to know in 6 races, I think Horner basically has made his mind up, in which case I think the smart thing for Red Bull to do is to get another driver in that seat for 2025. Like, maybe that's Hajar, maybe it's Colapinto. I don't know who it is. Like, Colapinto is an issue because he's Williams, and Williams will probably need him back at some point. Then again, Red Bull has a lot of money and a lot of sway. Maybe they could convince Colapinto to just, they could break him out of contract, pull him in. Bortoleto as well. Bortoleto could be a more interesting one.
But
because
Bortoleto is not coming, right? He's a McLaren junior. McLaren wants
probably not. But if they can convince him, look, come into the V-Carb, and if Ricardo underperforms, you'll be in the top team, whereas McLaren can't offer you anything for 2 years and will buy you out of the contract. Like, there's ways around everything in this sport. But I when it comes to that seat for Perez, as much as I think Ricardo's probably overall a mistake, I also think there's no downside to it at this moment. Like, he's a known quantity who cannot possibly perform any worse than Perez is performing right now. He can, I agree, actually, but it's very unlikely. Like, it's such a bad performance by Perez.
In the last, I think, 5 or 6 races, Checo has scored lesser points than both the Haas drivers. So, I mean, make of it what you want to.
I mean, the downside is you get Ricardo who does just as badly as Perez, right? The upside is you potentially get a Ricardo with nothing to lose and his confidence back, coming in and absolutely, being on point. Not beating Max, that's just not going to happen, but being the perfect number 2. Like, you could end up with that situation. And not only that, a driver who is absolutely 100% marketable to make up for the money loss. So, like, that should not be their only decision. But it feels to me like that is their only decision right now. I can't think of any other situation that works unless they buy a driver from another team, which could just as easily fail.
I think for me, 2025 should be, ideally, it should be just a case of filling an option where they need a slot gap option. And for 2026, they should ideally target maybe a George Russell or something because he's out of contract.
Here's what I think. For 2025, they need to basically just use it as a year to assess all options. So that is, get Ricardo in the seat, even if it's only for half a season, right?
Yeah.
Decide on Lawson by the end of this 6 seasons. Is he moving up or not? If not, chuck him into the reserve driver. He's not going anywhere else after that anyway, so you can keep him on the sidelines at least till the end of the season. So if you change your mind, he's still an option. That gets Hadjar into the seat in VCARB to assess him. If Ricciardo doesn't work out and Hadjar is doing really well, you can move him in for half a season, get someone else in the VCARB. Like, you're assessing your options. The problem Red Bull has had is for the last 4 seasons, they haven't assessed any options. But they haven't even assessed any options. All the options they've assessed,
ones, honestly. Hadjar is not.
But if they kept moving through all of the F2 drivers like they used to, they'd probably have a good option by now. You know, they'd probably have someone.
Yuki has caused this logjam, and
Red Bull has, and Red Bull, as in the parent company, have. Well, Red Bull, the parent company, because normally when Dietrich was around, if Yuki wasn't moving up, Dietrich would have said, "I'll chip in the money that Honda are paying, like move him out of the seat. Like, we don't need the Honda money." But because Red Bull is trying to make the team profitable, the Honda money is more important than long-term goals. It doesn't make sense.
Seems like it. Yeah, that's a lot of issues actually for them. Anyways, if I have to make a final call, I think the last 4 races. Well, first of all, someone needs to have I think maybe the slight slap on the wrist that probably he's gotten from Horner and Marco. Maybe that would help.
Maybe it just could be too late, given how quickly Horner makes decisions.
Plus, the thing is, this is natural, right? You can't change someone's natural behavior, and if this is how he is in general, and then it's very hard to control them. And Red Bull needs a second driver they can control. That's the only reason why Yuki is not there, honestly.
If I'm looking at that, like, as a person who've run businesses, had employees, all these sorts of things before, like, if I see you are this nervous and stressed out in what is essentially an interview, and it's for a really high pressure job, I'm going to think, well, if you're this stressed in the interview, you're not good enough for the job. That's it. Like, it's a simple solution, And being Max Verstappen's teammate is a tough job. So
let's see. Yeah. Anyways, enough from the Mexican Grand Prix.
Jesus, we're at 2 hours already. We should
we should wrap it up quickly. Soon.
Yeah.
Up next is Brazil. We have the Brazilian Grand Prix. By the way, your forecast was more or less right about Mexico.
Was it?
Didn't really rain, right? I mean, that's the only question you have to ask these days.
Yeah, but that's because I live in Mexico. I kind of understand. Like,
precisely.
As soon as they were like, "Oh, it's getting dark," I was like, "That rain is not coming anytime soon."
Yeah,
because it has to climb up.
It did.
But it has to climb up a mountain. So basically, it usually washes off at the side of a mountain. So you need like, you'd want black clouds for you to know there's rain incoming.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was like it's not happening.
So again, Brazil. I think your favorite moment, your most memorable moment for Brazil.
Probably Vettel, 2010. No, not 2010. What am I saying? No, not 2010. What am I trying to say here?
12.
12, wasn't it? Yeah. Why did I say 2010? Because 2010 ended in Abu Dhabi, right? Pole. Yes. There's one. Hulkenberg pole.
Yeah.
Brazil is one of those tracks that genuinely, it's more difficult to think of a bad race than a good one. It basically always delivers. Like, it's fantastic as a season ender. 2012 was when he spun, right? He got spun out and had to climb back. Or was that 2000? Yeah. That's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah. And it looked like Fernando was on to win, and Vettel just drove through the field. Just incredible.
And that's one of the better drives from any driver. And again, if anyone says Vettel does not know how to race, I mean, just go back and watch this race.
He's a brilliant wheel-to-wheel racer that everyone just... It was because he started from pole and won from pole so much, they basically just said, he can only win from pole. And it's like, no, he's on pole a lot.
He just does not suck in qualifying. That's the only thing.
Yeah, he's not Lewis Hamilton. But yeah, Brazil is just a banger all of the time. For
me, it's 2007.
Yeah.
2007.
Yeah. Wow.
Because I the first ever race that I saw was 2005 Monaco Grand Prix, and that was Kimi just blasting the entire field. Like, it was basically, he was in an entirely different category. And when you see that and you see the kind of bad luck he had continuously, I think even there were 4 or 5 race wins that went begging for him in 2005. And if you just add it all up, you see the kind of points he would have scored. He would have probably beat Alonso to the title as well.
Yeah.
And in 2007, when you saw again, I won't say that the 2007 Kimi Raikkonen was the fastest Kimi Raikkonen we've ever seen,
No.
but it was a very mature Kimi
Fantastic.
Raikkonen who
Yeah.
he actually entered a different team, an environment which was completely different, way too much politics. Car was different. The tires were different. There were Bridgestones. He'd done his entire career on Michelin's and been ridiculously brilliant. From there, the move came. He took some time to get used to it. And I think the second phase was the one where he just and again a lot of focus was on Lewis and Alonso, and Alonso kind of got unfairly villainized, I feel, in that season. But the way Kimi won, and again, I think I was very young. It was 15 or 16 at the time. I remember watching that race and like, wow, that was completely worth it.
I'm trying to remember because obviously it was the season finale, I think, which is why a lot of us have been watching it for a long time. Like it was always the banger season finale.
The last race, yeah.
2009 it was Brazil. 2010 it was Brazil. Right?
No. 2009 was Abu Dhabi.
2009 was 2009 Abu Dhabi as well.
Yeah.
It was 2009, 2010, 2011 was that Brazil? Yes. Then 2012 was Brazil. So when did it change completely? Because I was trying to remember. 2013 was Brazil as the finale.
2013 was
it
Brazil.
2014 then? 2014 was Abu Dhabi.
And from that point onwards.
So I think it switched for 2010, 2011, something like that, and then it went back to Brazil and then back to Abu Dhabi. Brazil was always a far better fucking finisher than Abu Dhabi.
Final race. Because it threw a lot of surprises, right? And for Abu Dhabi, you basically had to force Nicolas Latifi to crash.
Abu Dhabi, you're never going to have weather issues, basically. At that, so it's just, with Brazil, you never knew when it would just start lashing rain. So
plus, the track is unforgiving, right? That's the biggest thing. It induces mistakes, crashes, and so many things. And I mean, I still remember it was in 2012. If it was not for Pedro de la Rosa crashing, I think Hülkenberg would have overtaken both Alonso and Massa. And Alonso would have been out of contention.
Imagine 2021 if they went into Brazil on 0 points. The Abu Dhabi scandal was over, and then Max, Lewis would have won the championship, but it would have been essentially. They would have gone in with 7 points ahead after Abu Dhabi or whatever. But it would have ended ended incredibly because it would have been Lewis getting disqualified and then having to come through the field. That would have been an incredible ending to 2021 that Lewis fans probably would have been quite happy with. But yeah, Brazil was just 2021 always better.
I think the hilarious part about it, the 2021 Brazil Grand Prix is the day it was happening was the day I was getting married. So.
Oh really? Oh wow. I'm trying to think as well. Like Abu Dhabi's just terrible because as much as like Seb winning in Abu Dhabi in 2010 was great, for example, because I was a Vettel fan, but like. Realistically, it was only because Petrov was just able to hold up fucking Alonso for so long.
I'll be honest. I mean, there are championship deciders where I felt that the entire bad luck of the entire season, it just flipped in the last race. And I think that happened with Kimi in 2007.
Yeah.
It happened with Vettel in 2010.
Yeah.
2021.
Or vice versa
again,
for
people
Alonso,
might not
depending
like
on
it.
who you were looking at.
Yeah.
2021,
and even, I mean, people might not like it, but
do you not feel like
was very unlucky.
Abu Dhabi is conducive to that, whereas Brazil is kind of the one where it's more exciting because it's usually something goes wrong and that driver is fighting through the field. Like we've seen that a few times. Vettel, obviously there was Hamilton. Is that Glock on the last corner? Michael Schumacher
2006.
Yes, yeah. Like it's always a banger. I'm trying to think of a bad Brazil race and I can't think of one. Like they're always really interesting. I mean, there has been, but I'm struggling to think of one where I'm like, that was a terrible race. Whereas there's a lot of Abu Dhabis where I'm like, that was a boring race.
I mean, the 2019 Brazil was stunning, where Max won.
Yeah.
In 2018 was, again, where I think Ocon and Max fought. So that was also something interesting. And
Yeah.
there's always something happening in Brazil. So yeah,
That's the
I
thing,
agree.
yeah. Abu Dhabi's quite a dull race generally. It's not a good.
Middle
It's
East
not a
can be
good
dull,
season
right?
ender. Yeah, Brazil's a brilliant season ender.
I'd rather Bahrain be the last race of the season because at least it's fun. But
Yeah,
again,
100%. Abu Dhabi's
yeah,
really dull in my opinion.
yeah. I mean, they
Yeah,
should make a new track, probably a better one. But this one
yeah,
is
yeah.
rubbish. Anyways, what do you expect the pecking order to be in the top four? Yeah, yeah. We kind of discussed it a bit earlier.
Top four cars. I think it's personally like I know you think it's going to be Ferrari. I think it's going to be McLaren. Personally, I think it'll be McLaren, Ferrari, and then it's a toss up. Mercedes could do really well here or really poorly, and I'm not sure which. I think it's probably if I was putting money on it, I'd probably say it's McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes. But I do think the Mercedes is going to be closer to the Red Bull than they were in Mexico.
How so?
At a guess. I don't know. I just have a feeling. And like Christian Horner, my gut's usually right, so I'm going to go with it. It's because there's certain characteristics where the Mercedes will do well, but there's other parts of the track where the Mercedes could do really badly. So I'm not sure how that's going to affect them. I'm not 100% sure that the balance issues for Red Bull have been solved. And I think I'm not sure if they got away with some of it because of Mexico or maybe were hurt more because of Mexico's air. We'll have to see this
we have
weekend.
no idea, right? And
No.
that's
That's
plus
the
this one
beauty of
is
the
also
season.
exactly.
Yeah.
Plus, the high altitude will play a role here as well. So
Yeah.
you might see
Yeah.
that being a factor. I just think we might be in a scenario where, because for me, the biggest surprise was Ferrari being this strong. I didn't expect
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
when that happened, again, so what it appears to be the case is in the fast speed sections, McLaren has an edge. But whatever the
Yep.
slow speed section is, that's where Ferrari tends to pull some gap. Now for Sao Paulo, the S1 and S3 are basically straight lines, so there's
Yeah. Yeah.
hardly any difference. Then you have a big chunky slow part of the track that is sector 2. And that's where I think Ferrari will pull a huge gap. That's why I think Charles Leclerc is going to win the race.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying Charles Leclerc top. I think it could just. I think it'll personally. I think it'll be McLaren then Ferrari, but I don't think it's going to be huge difference between them. So I think it's going to be all about execution.
Yeah.
I would not. I think it's going to be Lando, Leclerc,
It's
Hamilton.
a sprint weekend as well, right?
Yeah, I'm going to say Lando, Leclerc, Hamilton for a podium.
Lando, Leclerc, Hamilton.
Yeah.
I don't see Mercedes jumping that high up. I think it might be. I think I'm going with Charles, Lando, and I mean Oscar cannot have these many shit races, so I'm going with Oscar.
I
That's my
think.
top
Yeah,
three.
I'm not saying Oscar's going to be down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the last few races, I wouldn't be surprised if, even though Mercedes will be up and down, I think this is going to be one of those kind of. Hamilton tends to have big swings of luck, and I would not be surprised if for the last few races, there's like here Brazil, and
Basically, you're saying if Hamilton is finishing ahead, it's going to be because of luck.
yes, yeah, because George is the better driver. Yeah, so I'll say that 100%. Yeah. But I would not be surprised if Brazil, because it's kind of like his quote unquote second home race because he's got his citizenship.
He's already said that.
And Abu Dhabi are the two races where he finishes a good bit ahead of Russell because it's just kind of like last season with Mercedes. I think he needs it as well because next year is going to be a shit show for him. So yeah, I'm gonna say Lando, Leclerc, and then Hamilton. Yeah,
Yeah. I
and
think
Max is going to be P20.
Imagine if that happens, actually,
They're going to put a new engine in. They're going to put a new engine in. Zach Brown's going to piss in the gas tank and it's going to blow up on lap 5.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. Or they'll get disqualified for a rear wing or something and everyone will go fucking insane.
Oh, God. I think
Because of
that's
the
the best thing
McLaren
about
rear
the
wing.
season, At least finally it's ramping up, and I hope it ramps up even more. Because
Yeah.
I think, again, we're going to see something similar where Max will have a strong qualifying. He'll still be amongst the top 3 or something. And then in the race, he'll just start falling back.
See,
and
this
that's
is the
where
thing. I've said
shit
for
gets
ages,
real.
I don't care who wins, right? Like for me, Like I said last year when Max was winning every race, I said I would love if someone could just challenge Max. I don't care if he wins every weekend as long as he's fighting for it. So for me, there's a part of me that kind of wants a mechanical DNF for Max, because that brings not only Norris in, but it gives Leclerc an outside chance as well. So my brain is going, come on, give us a last title fight. It'd be amazing. Like there so unexpected.
34 points on the table, right? This time around. Let's see what happens. I really hope Max kind of settles down. I think he'll take this few days to actually regroup and analyze. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, this is the problem that Norris has, is that Max doesn't fall off for very long. So
yeah,
Lando needs to be the absolute top driver he can be, and it's a problem fighting against Max. Simple as. Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
True.
A mechanical DNF would be great, because if we get a title fight in the last race of this season, I genuinely think this has been on par with 2012 by that point, because it's so ridiculous. The only thing that makes 2012 better is just the Alonso Vettel title fight. Yeah, and Vettel won, and I'm a Vettel fan. And just the fact that there was such a thing between the two of them, it was brilliant. Whereas this has been a different kind of season, but if it goes to the wire, amazing.
Yeah. I agree with you. Yeah. I completely agree with you. Wow, would be fun, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, so that's it for this one.
Yeah,
and,
2 hours, 10 minutes.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe and do all the other good stuff. Sorry, I'm tired. I haven't had
comment, subscribe, all those things. You know, if you're offended, share the podcast with everyone you're offended with. You know.
Yeah. Bring all the offenders.
If you're offended, go on Twitter and share this out to show everyone else what morons we are, because that will hurt us. Yeah. Don't tell them that won't hurt us. Yeah. All right.
Take care, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.